Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 101 to 120. Chapter 101 to 103. Dubalong's Request. Okuyo's Arm. I tossed it in front of my dungeon in China. Buds sprouted from the arm and unknown flowers were now blooming. Okulo's, I don't know what he got from me, but I won't be able to identify it now. On the other hand, I know him a little bit better. I noticed something when he used the naturalization skill. Roots came out from Okuyo's body. I looked at the arm in front of my dungeon. This was China, at the dungeon that originally belonged to Saman. Unless information was exchanged among his faction, Upa wouldn't notice that this was my dungeon. As long as Okulos didn't take dungeons from other demons, he wouldn't know that movement between dungeons was possible. I would be able to respond sufficiently if Okulos made any movements. I moved to the top floor of the dungeon where Sik was red-faced. Sik, this bitch, how could you do that? Bah, what did Yi do? And why is Sik calling me such a tasteless name? There was a familiar face. Yi was yelling at Sik with crossed arms. I guess the fairies can also move between dungeons. Movement. I thought I could only move my body, but it was possible for the fairies to move as well. Guyo didn't see the need, but Yi seemed to have passed ties with Sik. I worked so hard to find that flower. You just stepped on it. Omo, Yi did that? Well, that can't be. There is no way Yi would step on such a flower. Sik's shoulder was hit. But Sik said I was going to bring a flower to you. That bothered Yi too. I didn't want you to bring me anything. Yi got goosebumps because of it. Sik, I can't forgive you. Just wait until I become the fairy king. Yi, that can't be. Master is crazy about Yi. Third parties should stay out. Do you think that you can steal Yi's place? No. Master gave Sik a chance. No. Master is crazy about Yi. No. I interrupted before the two started to fight each other. I will give fair chances. Master. Master. Sik cheered while Yi pouted. The ties between both of you are deeper than I thought. It is a bad relationship. Yi's stalker. Please scold her. Yi sat on my shoulder and rubbed her cheek against mine to show off her closeness. Sik's face reddened. Did anything happen while I was away? No, Master. Yi has something. Master hasn't been back to the dungeon lately. So Yi wanted to deliver this to you directly. Otherwise I wouldn't have come here to see this ugly kid. Sik immediately protested. What? Bah, they were like cats and dogs. Yi ignored Sik and held out a small piece of paper. There were short sentences written. I didn't take my eyes off the paper. The Dark Spirit King wants to meet you. I assure you that it will be beneficial. How about I set up a time? Dubalong. There wasn't anything else stated on the paper, but the contents were unusual. Dark Spirit King. The director of the auction who was capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the Grand Dukes. Had I ever seen him in my previous life? An issue might have occurred. I spent a large amount of points and he handed over a seed of the World Tree to me. The Dark Spirit King hoped to contain the Grand Dukes. Or he wanted me to grow to a similar level. The meeting was to give me more assistance. Or something unexpected happened. There was no need to think for a long time. But I didn't laugh, I couldn't relax and needed to be prepared. I wasn't naive about the Dark Spirit King. The spirit world was full of ambitious schemers. Great achievements were required to become the ruler of the spirit world. He might plan to trick me somehow. I needed to always calculate from a distance. I turned the piece of paper and saw the time stated. 10 days later, we will create a crack in space and time. In this regard, I was quite surprised. An action like this was normal only when it came to the Demon World auction. Forcefully creating a crack to move just me to the spirit world was a heavy burden. Originally it was impossible, but the system seemed to allow it. Although a penalty would obviously be received, many spirits would be destroyed in the process. It seems urgent. My expression hardened. He seemed to be in a hurry to meet me. It definitely wasn't ordinary. I crumpled up the piece of paper. 10 days was enough time to do some cleanup. I turned and gazed at the spirited Sik. Sik, where is he located? Sik replied with a pout. On the floor directly below. I understand. I moved to the floor below. He was something I gained from the altar in China. There was a problem, but I was going to look at him once again. The entrance to the floor was blocked by a huge pit. There was a brown, disgusting, strange creature emerging from it. He moved slowly like a snail and devoured everything around him. Master, Yi thinks he is really ugly. Yi, who was sitting on my shoulder, frowned. Even Yi, who had a strange sense of aesthetics, was reluctant to look at him. There was also a foul smell. Quack. At that moment, small tentacles emerged and headed towards me. I cut off the tentacles with wrath. He still doesn't recognize his master. How dare he attack master? A very bad creature. Should Yi kick his ass? I laughed as Yi rolled up her sleeves. That's okay. I heard that creature can even eat spiritual beings. HMPH. Hum hum. Yi will show mercy just this once. Yi stealthily withdrew. I don't know what to do with something like this. A creature from one of the gods. He didn't know why this uncontrollable, huge flesh that swallowed up everything was put on this earth. He even tried to eat me. I opened mind's eye to confirm his status. Name: Infinite Flesh. Stats: Strength 90, Intelligence 0, Agility 43, Stamina 130, Magic Power 35, Potential 298 320ths. Uniqueness: while delivering the dead, Anubis accidentally placed them in the River of Chaos. A monster of chaos consisting of 20 million souls was born, and grows by consuming everything in its surroundings. He resembles Gluttony of the Seven Sins. Skill: Growth, Epic. Stats that were extremely imbalanced. A creature that had transcendental stamina. But he was just a major headache. He couldn't even recognize his master and was too busy eating. Anyway, it was obvious that he would cause problems in my dungeon. Troublesome. I pressed a hand against my forehead. Then Yi clapped her hands. Master, master, throw him away. Yi has been thinking. He is just an ungrateful bastard eating the magic power in the dungeon. He might even eat up the altars or dungeon core. Yi is horrified just imagining it. That's right, I should throw him away. I inwardly sighed. Throw him away? After all, he didn't fit. It would have been okay if he had a little bit of intelligence. Keeping him in the dungeon would just cause a headache. It didn't matter that he was a gift from the gods. But how will you get rid of him? Yi placed her hands on her hips and asked. Infinite Flesh had a habit of eating anything in close reach. I contemplated for a moment before saying, I have to use a scroll. It was possible to move him using a scroll. It would waste some points, but I needed to get rid of the creature before he caused problems. Yi, that is wise. But where will he go? Fairy were curious by nature. I thought of places where I could discard him. I will place him near a dungeon belonging to Grand Duke Upa's faction. Of course, there was no guarantee that Infinite Flesh would head to the dungeon. He was a senseless creature that wouldn't listen to anyone's commands, but I would also get points from any awakened that tried to block him. I decided to place him near Duke Pacan Grioli's dungeon. It would require hundreds of thousands of points to move Infinite Flesh to Saudi Arabia, but it was worth it if I could deal a blow to a duke. Anyway, I had over 10 million points, so it was an initiative I could take. After handling the troublesome one, I moved to my dungeon in South Korea. The 25th floor. I felt odd as I stepped into a sacred area. This was the influence of holy power on demons. I walked forward and found Tashmal. All the eggs are hatched. In the heart of the sacred zone, countless black fur formed a nest and baby angels with small wings were crawling. Tashmal was busy taking care of the baby angels and didn't notice I had arrived. You seem busy. Ah, did you come? That's right, I am lacking hands. In contrast to her words, her expression was quite soft. I had never seen such kindness on her face. I said with a smile, you seem to be doing well. I don't know whether I am doing well. The angels are always raised by archangels. I just hope that, this child. Come down. A baby angel was flying with its small wings. Tashmal panicked and grabbed the baby angel. Do you require anything? Who? Can you bring me a few leaves from the tree of origin? Tashmal said while forcing the baby angel to come down. Why do you need the leaves? The leaves from the tree of origin will make their wings grow significantly larger. I only tried it a few times, but the effect was excellent. Tashmal was a Dominion's angel and knew the important effect of the leaves. Certainly, there were a few leaves on the stem. I also had great interest in the growth of the angels. I will send it through Chrisley. Thank you. I nodded. Over time, I would start breaking down Tashmal's wall. She accepted the reality of raising the angels, but her final mission was to kill all the demons. She wouldn't take action towards me until the end, so it wasn't easy for her to say thank you to me. If you need anything, then speak to Chrisley. Unders, this troublemaker. You aren't ready to fly yet. Your wings are still weak and might break. Tashmal was busy. I shrugged and turned away. The angels had grown. Tashmal was a fallen angel, so I was glad it didn't cause any problems. Angels in a demon's dungeon. I was looking forward to seeing the effects. I also made sure to check the situation of the creatures in China's dungeon. There was only one thing remaining. The Devil Hunters raid group? They thought that I was dead. There was a possibility that the raid group itself would collapse. I exited the dungeon. I easily bypassed the soldiers guarding the dungeon since there was no need to inform them of my survival. I hesitated as I entered the city. There were banners saying, "Tribute to Randolph Nim," or, "We will not forget his devotion," hanging all over the place. My photos and personal information were handled as secretly as possible, so there was only writing on the banners. The hero has already been dead for 100 days. As a result, how many people were saved? Let us remember, think about it forever. His sacrifice, his glory. In particular, there was a long memorial procession in Gangnam. There were familiar faces in the middle of the procession. Yoo Eun-hye, Lee Ji-hye, Kim Yong-woo and Edward Windsor. Yoo Eun-hye in particular had tears streaming down her face and was dressed in the color of deepest mourning. Her face was slender like she hadn't eaten. It was bigger than I expected. This had escalated more than I liked. Intense feelings that I couldn't easily dismiss. I should think of some ideas in the spirit world. I never thought my influence would be this great. Well, I was the strongest awakened with a level that no one could ignore. I had forgotten that humans were sentimental towards the dead. It was a scene that I never saw in my previous life. I should handle it carefully. I needed to think of some ways to address this problem. I headed back to my dungeon. The promised date with Dubalong was approaching. Ying, the dungeon's top floor. A crack occurred near the core. It was unstable, like it wouldn't last long. But I had already made my decision. There was no hesitation. I stepped into the crack. The only thing I could see was darkness. But there was a light. It was shining from far away and seemed to be the exit. I walked out of the light into a wide room. I looked at the one standing in front of me. "Welcome, Randolph Briggseel Nim. I believed you would come." Dubalong, who was still dressed as a clown, bowed respectfully. Dubalong, cool-headed and resourceful, a poisonous scammer, the best henchman for the Dark Spirit King. He was the spirit that greeted me directly. It was natural since he invited me in the first place. I nodded. "I am looking forward to meeting the Dark Spirit King. You won't regret it. But this isn't the castle I previously appeared in." The room was similar to the previous times I had been summoned, but the magic power was subtly different. Dubalong laughed and said, "You noticed? Yes. This isn't the castle. Is there a reason?" I gave a slight frown and placed my hand on Wrath. I didn't like that he summoned me to another place without prior notice. If I wasn't convinced by his excuses, then I would mercilessly use Wrath on Dubalong. Dubalong started sweating as he spoke. A high-class spirit wouldn't be easy to take down. I wouldn't kill him if I didn't have to. The spies of other spirit kings have broken into the castle. They forcefully opened a crack and attacked the Dark Spirit King. Please be understanding? The Dark Spirit King was ambitious. He ate up contracts and opened the Demon World auction. He could do that by sacrificing numerous spirits. The other spirit kings had noticed. But the timing was too fast. It took 10 years for this to occur in my previous life. The Dark Spirit King started a war shortly after gathering a large number of points. My movements are affecting the spirit world. My movements were the only thing different from my previous life. I had exposed myself in the Demon World auction. Perhaps the points I used influenced this event? It was like small wings causing a big typhoon that caused a seismic shift. Strange. Would it really be that easy to defeat the Dark Spirit King? Dubalong's forehead furrowed. Who? Do you know the mythical creature from the middle world called the Shadow Emperor? A familiar name. I nodded. I know. We could never touch the treasure trove he left behind. No, to be honest, it was absolutely impossible, but recently there were signs of a dimensional move. The other spirits dispatched a military force and used it for navigation. Ah, that was the cause. Now the fog had cleared. The spirits were interested in many things on the middle world. Something happening in the middle world would naturally catch their interest. I was directly related to the matter. It wasn't due to the demon world auction. That's right. The dark spirits are repelled by light spirits. The fire and wind spirits are also troublesome to deal with together. So it can't hurt to be careful. You also want to grasp my growth. Isn't that right? Reading such weak magic power would be a moderate estimate of my growth. They deliberately made the room like this. Their intentions were so obvious that I couldn't help laughing. It was annoying, but the dark spirits were originally like this. Would I do that? I have a lifelong relationship with Randolph Nim. Dubalong waved his hand. I released my hand from wrath. There is no second chance. Haha, of course. I shouldn't be doing this now, so let's move. Dubalong shamelessly guided me. The Wailing Forest, a haven for dark spirits. There were moans and screams coming from everywhere. The magic power of the forest itself was to blame. Dubalong said with a playful expression. Be careful, you might be invaded by spirits. It wasn't a joke. I spoke to Dubalong as I looked around. This is certainly a place for the Dark Spirit King. Please don't say that in front of the Dark Spirit King. Dubalong's voice trembled slightly. He had really high loyalty to the Dark Spirit King. It was great that he didn't show his hostility. I won't. Courtesy was necessary everywhere. Dubalong switched to another topic. Do you have a lot of points? I heard that there was a recent surge in the average points of demons. A moderate amount. By the way, how much is the average number of points? I didn't mention any direct numbers. My points being over 10 million was a hidden weapon. Even if I had a partnership with him, it was ideal to hide it. Dubalong replied like it was inconsequential. At this time, roughly 850,000. Alas, we are indeed fortunate. The average points is close to 1 million, so I wonder if I should bring out a high-class creature. The spirits were able to figure out the average points of the demons. And close to 1 million would allow them to bring out high-class creatures. 3 years. The emergence of high-class creatures was really fast. I asked a question after hearing those words. You don't already have one prepared? It happened so suddenly. There are a few candidates. Recently an older titan was obtained. There was also a whale-shaped creature found in a cave. They are candidates, but Dubalong shook his head and said, my offer from the past is still valid. Would you like to make a deal if you have any high-class creatures? We will pay for it. I will think about it. We had a relationship, so there was no need to outright reject him. It was important to properly look after the relationship. Of course, I had no intention of handing over the high-class creatures I obtained from the gods. I hope it moves in a positive direction. Dubalong shrugged. Soon they arrived at a cleared area. There was a big thatched building in the center of the cleared area. It is simple. The Dark Spirit King doesn't like luxury. It was nonsense. There was no end in sight to the size of the Demon World auction. I didn't know it personally, but the nature of the Dark Spirit King didn't fit with those words. At that moment, Dubalong turned towards me. He said with a stiff expression, his request, please don't refuse it. Dubalong walked up to the entrance. The door opened and a tall man wearing a black cloak was sitting in a chair. He wore rings on all 10 fingers, and accessories covered his body. There was something everywhere I looked. Splendorous was a description that matched him. It is nice to meet you. I spoke first. The Dark Spirit King burst out laughing. Nice to meet me? Pua, come in. From a distance, he looked like someone who would make a big fuss, but this was only a facade. I sat down across from the Dark Spirit King. I immediately looked at him with Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye, XU, has penetrated, Shadow Eyes, XU. Attack rate 60%. High magic power correction, 96. But the opponent's intelligence is higher. The attack rate is 54%. Specific information about the opponent will be private. Name: Adonis. Occupation: Dark Spirit King. Title: * The Dark Spirit King. Epic: Strength and Magic Power +6. * Ruler who causes trembling. Epic: Magic Power +10. * Behind Shadows. XU. Strength +8. * Those who despise. XU. Stamina +8. Stats: Strength 100. +14, Intelligence 100. Agility 100, Stamina 100, +8. Magic Power 100, +16. Potential: 500 +38. Uniqueness. Skill. Tremor. Shadow eyes. XU. Adonis frowned. What are you looking at? I like your accessories. I crossed my legs, but inwardly I was completely different from my composed exterior. How great. A total of 538 stat points. He was already a transcendental person. Yet he still failed to break through his limits. Maybe it was frozen at this point because he couldn't break through. He would become even stronger if he went over his limit. There were also question marks. His ability was on a similar level to the Grand Dukes in the demon world, so I couldn't help feeling admiration. You really are an unknown person. I am anxious to hear why you called me here. I had no intention of having comfortable small talk. Adonis cupped his chin. Before that, I would like to ask you something. What do you see yourself as? Devil. I wouldn't let anyone else become the devil. It was a resolution that I made every day. Adonis was at a loss for a moment after my reply showed no hesitation. A great aspiration. Randolph Briggseel, you resemble me in that sense. Are you aiming to rule over all the spirits in the spirit world? That's right, not just a spirit king. I am determined to truly become a god. In order to do this, a lot of help is needed. I knew the problem. It was like trying to walk among the stars. I just sat there as Adonis laughed. I wouldn't normally ask, but I am very curious about you, Randolph Briggseel. Your attitude didn't change. It's like you were aware of this from the beginning. Your curiosity shouldn't touch someone like me. A cool personality. Good. I think we should start talking specifics. I feel more at ease after talking to you. So I ask you, Randolph Briggseel, will you form a contract with me? A contract with a spirit. That was the main point. The request that Dubalong told me not to reject. It was taboo for the dark spirits to make contracts at the Demon World auction organized by them. There could be issues of fairness the moment someone received favoritism. But the dark spirits had many tricks. This contract would be formed away from the eyes of the system. The problem, this was the Dark Spirit King. Why? Do you really need to go to such lengths? Things are changing very quickly. Randolph Briggseel, you must feel it as well. There are many enemies, but our number is too small. However, it is a different story if we can help each other. Accepting it would allow me to leap forward. It didn't seem unusual at first glance, but the agreement seemed to only be beneficial to me. The Dark Spirit King wouldn't get a lot of benefits from helping me. Such a contract with the Dark Spirit King, he was aiming for something. Adonis was a greedy bastard. That was the one thing I knew for certain. A contract with a spirit, sharing our capabilities with each other. Even if it is just helping me keep the demons in check. What does he have to gain from the contract? I thought for a moment. Getting a contract from me. I wouldn't be bound by a contract unless I figured it out. I have to determine it. There needs to be some significant reason before I accept. If not, there was no need to form the contract. He didn't know about my overwhelming points, my growth rate, or the situation in my dungeon. It would become harder if anyone figured out even one piece of that information. Adonis would need to go beyond simply helping to direct intervention. I reject. There was more harm than good. Adonis' expression changed at my reply. Why? This is a chance to preempt the goods from the Demon World auction. I will also give you necessary information about some dungeons. And if you help me grow, we can both be the best in the future. Losing his temper. But my position was the opposite. There was a need to immediately straighten it out. Talk. I got up from my seat and slammed my hand against the desk. Do I look stupid? Or are you so overconfident that you think I would be reeled in with a good story? Adonis didn't want me. In the last 2 years, I had a ridiculous number of points compared to the other demons. I was their best VIP customer. I couldn't be excluded from the Demon World auction no matter what. Adonis was hoping to conquer the spirit world. Gathering more points was essential to that. Conversely, I didn't really need the help of the Dark Spirit King. Dubalong told me all about the brutal acts he used to gain the throne. Our positions were different. Adonis' hard expression relaxed. He had finally realized the subtle difference. What is going to come out? I was quite curious. There were different actions that he could take. Would Adonis apologize for his mistake? Or maybe he would let his anger spiral out of control. A little bit of time passed before Adonis opened his mouth. I apologize. I got ahead of myself. Adonis regained his composure and took a comfortable position in his seat. His arrogant air was gone. Amazing. I had to admit it. Usually those in such high positions didn't like to admit their mistakes. At least, that was what I experienced. The Grand Dukes, in particular, Upa had such tendencies. And wasn't Adonis the Dark Spirit King? I felt sorry comparing him to Upa, who wasn't on his level. I sat down again. I wouldn't maintain my hard attitude in front of Adonis' apology. Spirit King, even though you helped me, aren't we just meeting today? If the basic courtesies are lost, then we are just like the other demons. That's right, courtesy might not seem like a big deal, but it is very important. Randolph Briggseel, you are unlike the other demons. That is why I singled you out. Adonis glanced at me and nodded with satisfaction. He seemed to have realized that his attitude was wrong. He subsequently said, "Then let's go back to the beginning. My name is Adonis. I am the Dark Spirit King who rules over the dark spirits." I grabbed his outstretched hand and replied, "Randolph Briggseel, I am grateful for the seed of the world tree. I've lived for a long time and never imagined an exchange like this with a demon." Adonis said with a large smile. I released my hand and also smiled. There is a saying that one good turn deserves another. Adonis, you did a favor for me, so I won't be hostile towards you. That's right, your words are correct. It seems like I fit very well with you. It was my mistake to immediately talk about the contract. There was a warm atmosphere in the room. However, it could change if the incorrect button was pushed again. Adonis' smile remained unchanged as he said, "But Randolph Briggseel, telling you about the contract also isn't a bad thing. The contract even exerts its power over the Spirit Kings. In addition, any resistance you face in the spirit world will disappear. No one would dare oppose my authority as king. I'm not a person who leans on the authority of someone else." I see that, but the difference is huge. Is it really leaning on authority? The spirits have access to other worlds. It isn't impossible for the spirits to find and monopolize treasures from other worlds. The access of the spirits to other worlds. A clear variable. If they didn't need to force open a crack, then they could go back and forth from the spirit world. Of course, the personality of a demon made it hard for them to form a contract with the spirits, but they had a road that I could take. However, do we really need to make a contract with each other? It would be favorable if we listen to each other. Randolph Briggseel, I hope that your growth is like the sea, and entering a contractual relationship will allow us to become equal to each other. You will be the devil and I will be king of the spirit world, an invincible combination. No one shall touch us. Adonis snorted roughly. In the end, his intentions were exposed. He talked about a rosy future, but I wasn't swayed. I was aware of things he didn't say. In addition, the contract didn't mean that both sides would be equal to each other. Either way, I would have no choice but to be pulled. That was more likely. I might move from the position of customer to an equal, but Adonis would hold the advantage. I would regret this the first time Adonis needed something. His original jurisdiction was selling goods at the Demon World auction. I was someone who bought the goods. There was no telling what could happen. He could pass over insignificant information or be condescending. On the other hand, I was at an advantage because I was the customer, leading in points. If that advantageous position was to disappear due to the contract, this would only be the semblance of equality. He couldn't ignore the situation, but it wasn't possible to form a contract unless I was completely satisfied with it. It isn't easy to make a decision about this issue. Luck. At this point, it was a big advantage but even bigger disadvantage. At the very least, the contract meant Adonis would get his hands on my points. I needed to have something over Adonis. Then I will hear your answer at the next Demon World auction. How about it? Adonis said. There were still 6 months remaining. I needed to make a decision within that time. Insufficient. 6 months wasn't enough. Adonis, what is making you so hasty? I told you, the surroundings are changing too quickly. There is a need to prepare. Due to the movement of the other spirit kings? Yes. And heaven, the demons aren't safe. So before that, the both of us need to build a united force. Adonis closed his mouth after saying that. The movements of the other spirit kings. Adonis was concerned and wanted to use illegal methods to gain the position. It had only been 3 years, so they was lacking preparation. It would be impossible for the spirit kings to catch Adonis if they had to keep fending off his attacks. My mind understood why he wanted to secure his position. He intended to use me to grow. Maybe he intended to use me as a shield. My judgments might be too complex, but it was better to discover the variables. In particular, the latter would be the worst-case situation. When thinking about it, there weren't many subjects where I could be neutral. Adonis. That is why we need to be more cautious about each other. Frankly, dealing with the Grand Dukes alone is an arduous task. It would certainly be reassuring if I had your aid, but more time is needed for trust to build. If the day comes where we need to fight back to back, I hope you won't be someone who betrays me. I stared into Adonis' eyes. I wanted to become the devil, but common sense dictated it was impossible to deal with the Grand Dukes alone. He didn't know about the hidden cards I received from coming back. Adonis. He would have to reach out to help me. Huh? Randolph Brigzeal, you truly don't think like a demon. I don't know where your confidence comes from. If you are going to stand at my back, I also want to be aware of your level. 10 million. 10 million? That is the number of points I have right now. It hasn't been that long since the last Demon World auction finished. Is that really true? I had used millions of points in the second Demon World auction. Judging by Adonis' reaction, he hadn't fully identified my scope. A superficial knowledge, yet he still coveted me. He would drool even more if I revealed more of myself. I just laughed. If it is false, then won't you find out at the next Demon World auction? That would be foolish. Does that mean you will use more than 10 million points in the next Demon World auction? Of course, if you have some good things prepared. Adonis frowned slightly. There were signs of struggle on his face. But he soon made a decision. Okay, that kind of strength. I guess you don't need my help right away. We will establish a relationship over time and talk about the contract again later. At that time, we can meet face to face with each other. Adonis retreated a step. Thank you for your patience. No, it was a reasonable opinion. Either way, this talk shouldn't end here. I want to show you the alcohol and beauty of this place. I am just accepting a friend's request. Friend. Pua. Yes, it is polite to accept a friend's request. Friends. Adonis said that word for the first time. It showed he intended to make this favorable relationship last long. Kung. Adonis knocked on the table and shouted loudly. Dubalong. Prepare alcohol and women. A small banquet was held. Alcohol, fruits and dozens of beauties were prepared. Take this. Rather than gold and silver, I will give you a box of this precious, rare alcohol. Adonis was a wreck. He became drunk and took off all his clothes while surrounded by women. But his eyes never lost their sharp look. He moved quickly after confirming my existence. The alcohol and women were to receive my admiration. A great drink. Pua, I told you. Today is a special occasion, so let's drink to our glory. I don't enjoy drinking alcohol, but I can drink this one every day. Where else can you enjoy such alcohol? Why are you rejecting the lithe hands next to you? If you don't like them, then I will bring out men. It is more delicious to eat at the end. I embraced one of the succubus near me. Alcohol and women. It wasn't very good, but I didn't hate it. I would receive the present. And it was necessary to give in a little bit here. I tilted the glass and slowly poured the drink on her cleavage. And the succubus slowly bit my ear. The banquet ended and I exited after enjoying the succubus. Dubalong was nearby waiting for me. Was the banquet fun? There is no need to say anything. I'm glad. I hope there weren't any problems with the request. In the first place, our relationship was helping each other. I couldn't refuse. I said in a moderately serious tone. Dubalong smiled while guiding me. We arrived at the location where I was first summoned. The crack was still there. Dubalong bowed as I entered the crack and said, Then, Randolph Brigzeal Nim. I will see you at the next Demon World auction. Chapter 104 to 105, Abnormal Proliferation. The dungeon's 18th floor, the mountain zone that made up the habitat of the saber tigers. There were more than 600 saber tigers around. The configuration of the group was different. Around 50 had formed a group in order to take over other areas. And one of the saber tigers received the best evaluation and was called the boss. He led 100 saber tigers and succeeded in mating. After sowing several seeds that didn't give birth successfully, he finally mated with an attractive female and received offspring. His offspring was born after 3 months of pregnancy. It was very healthy. The problem was, the cub was a different color. Ordinary saber tigers had brown fur, but this one was white. His entire body stood out as unusual. Saber tigers were agile and skilled at snatching the enemy from the shadows. So the white color was a sign of a leader. The boss decided. It was a difficult birth and he was confident the group would follow his lead. He would use this opportunity to make other males yield. He put in strict measures and hunted the group of orcs. The cub grew well, and after a few months passed, the boss found out that he was deluded. This cub was unlike the usual saber tigers. It was true that a king of the saber tigers was born. But the king was a little too prominent. The degree of rebellion was enough that he even wanted to challenge the dungeon master. The white saber tiger, known as White, he reached an adult size in only a few months. And he already had dozens of saber tigers following him. Among there were newcomers who had just been born. After White was born, the reproduction rate greatly increased. Their numbers reached 300. Of course, they had to become fully grown in order to fight. White showed the most extraordinary performances in the fierce battles. But White didn't feel any exhilaration. This much was natural considering his position. He had separate complaints. First, he had high intelligence. It was enough to feel a difference with the others. He was also much stronger and agile. There were only 5 adults that were possible rivals for him. This difference became larger over time. He didn't just want to dominate this floor. White thought this floor was too narrow for the saber tigers. Yes, it was cramped. He wanted to leave this floor. But the adults stopped him. They said absolutely not. The dungeon master couldn't be disobeyed. If he stood before the dungeon master, then he would instinctively follow. Nonsense. He was a king, a symbol of freedom. No one could oppress him. Gerwong, White howled. He gathered those that belonged to his group. This was his first priority. The true king of the saber tigers would leave this floor. He would widen his forces and even become the master of this dungeon. White of the saber tigers proclaimed himself as the true king of this place. The numbers in his group gradually increased. White showed an overwhelming strength that made others submit to him. He managed to get his paws on half of the saber tigers when something happened. A bump, an existence similar to himself. That black bastard, an unusual black saber tiger, was born around this time. Before he knew it, Black increased his forces to a similar level. That guy was also strong. He admitted it, but there couldn't be 2 kings. It was inevitable that they would bump into each other. A fight between bosses involving their sharp teeth. They fought until they were both bloody, but the result was that White won. The black saber tiger declared defeat. White rose to the position of king. But it didn't end here. White vowed he would become king of the dungeon and left the floor with a large group of saber tigers. They climbed up one floor and the dark bears appeared. Their numbers weren't much and defeating them was easy. However, the 20th floor was a sea. White was distressed since he couldn't find a way to bypass it. He determined the method to cross the sea would be obtained downstairs. He subdued the enemies while going down and arrived on the 15th floor. This was the unusual place where the dark elves resided. White was happy. They would be able to tell him how to cross the sea. But White didn't compromise. All those not part of his group were enemies. He would use force to make them spit it out. He soon encountered the dark elves. Actually, the ferry has collapsed and Dungeon Master is quite busy right now. The dark elf in the lead. A female. She was different from the other dark elves and it was the first time White felt pressure. Grr, surrender. I don't know how you left the 18th floor, but this is due to the influence from the abnormal proliferation. It can't be helped. I need to punish these naughty beasts. Queen Nim, we will handle this. No, Elder Nim. This white one is strong and completely different from the General Saber Tigers. It is fortunate that he is not yet an adult. In this place, I'm sorry but I must do it. Charik, Charuruk. Chrisley walked forward with her wand and the Spartwa. How can I let them bother my dungeon master? Then can I say something to them? Gruong, daring to relax in front of him? White howled wildly but he just said with a smile on his face. Know your position. That is what I want to say. The top floor. I folded my arms in front of the dungeon core and watched Yihi. Yihi was slumped. Her body was collapsed like all the power had gone out and she was barely breathing. The spiritual body of a fairy didn't need to breathe but they would return to the source soon after they stopped breathing. The ego that made Yihi be Yihi. There was the possibility of losing it. Ooh, Yi-Yi's body trembled. I gently reached out and covered Yi-Yi's forehead. The trembling subsided a little bit. The abnormal proliferation. Ever since the dungeon's ecosystem was damaged, Yi-Yi and the dungeon core started to break down. It happened a few days after I went to the spirit world. The sudden propagation rate interfered with the flow of magic power. It was a temporary phenomenon that was a mistake. I quickly responded when Yi-Yi complained of pain. I recalled the memories from that time. Master, I think Yi-Yi is a little sick. Dizzy. My body is shaking. Is it because you were close? Oh, or maybe this is love? Hying. Really sick. Even flying is annoying Yi-Yi. I would like to lie down on Master's shoulders. The signs were clear. This wasn't a joke, so I needed to investigate. But the current situation wasn't that simple. The reproduction rate. It had increased by 500% compared to the previous rate. The dungeon core was receiving interference from the creature's excess magic power. It wouldn't matter if that number had slowly increased. There would be no need to worry once the dungeon adjusted to the magic power. In the end, I needed to make adjustments so that the dungeon could adapt to the creatures. I can guess the cause. The Tree of Origin. That's right, the Tree of Origin had a significant effect on the reproductive rate. But it felt like he got caught up in a stampede. I released the blessing, but there were no changes in the proliferation rate. The blessing from the Statue of Abundance continued. He stopped the blessing and waited for some time, but there was no change. The breeding rate continued to increase. Master, Yi-Yi drooled and muttered. Odic. I gritted my teeth. Yi-Yi was very important to me. In my previous life, she had devoted herself to me, but I threw her away. Now something was happening to Yi-Yi in front of me and I couldn't stop it. My dungeon master, Chrisley. I turned as Chrisley came close to me. I have something for you to see. Is it okay? It is okay. What is going on? The white saber tiger and his followers have left their floor and invaded the 15th floor. Ah, those guys. Did they descend to the 15th floor in an attempt to escape? I knew about the births of white and black. Their growth was excellent and they reached advanced 5 LV and 4 LV respectively. In particular, white was a special creature not available at the store of all things. But descending to the 15th floor in an attempt to escape? It wasn't good as the dungeon core currently wasn't working properly. In addition, I expressly stated that exiting their floors was forbidden. I was confused as Chrisley replied. This also seems to be the impact of the unusual proliferation. I've subdued them but they still aren't hiding their teeth. I guess I will go. My dungeon master. It isn't very urgent. Chrisley seemed to be worried about Yi-Yi as her eyes turned to the dungeon core. However, I shook my head. No, I will come to see. The impact of the dungeon core on the creatures. I was honestly curious. They even thought about leaving their floor to attack. They certainly weren't ordinary creatures. The 15th floor, white and black, were tied up next to the Tree of Origin. The rest of the saber tigers were expelled back to the 18th floor, but the two culprits needed to be handled. Grr, grang, white and black. I stared at both of them. White and black revealed their sharp teeth and howled wildly. However, I saw fear within them. Due to their escape from the influence of the dungeon core, they couldn't obtain a complete impression of me. It seems like you have great hostility towards me. The creatures dared to rebel in my own dungeon. It was outrageous but also funny. At that time, White tried to bite me. Gerwong. Now I understand. Yes, there can never be two kings on the mountain. I started laughing. I could understand his attitude. Rather than the insufficient 18th floor, he wanted to rule the dungeon itself. I couldn't allow that. The owner of this dungeon was me. Naturally, I was also White's owner. My dungeon master. Shall I kill those ungrateful creatures? I can't forgive them for that attitude. Chrisley approached me with an angry expression. But I raised my hand and stopped Chrisley. I know how hard it is to be the king and I need to tell them myself. I took out wrath and said, know your position. White didn't bend easily. Despite using his teeth and sharp claws, he still lost. He was originally a king. But the opponent was too strong. His body was in pain. Once he was completely drained and collapsed, a dark elf female healed him. He would fight again once he could move his body. But the next few fights were the same. Struggling against the dungeon master's sword, collapsing, treatment, getting back up again and so on. Once that process repeated a few times, White lowered his tail in surrender. Grr, That cruel bastard, White cried out. It was the first time he experienced such suffering. He was born into the saber tigers as the king, so he couldn't imagine something like this. The opponent was far too cruel. Chrisley, heal White, the dungeon master said while pointing down at White. Then the dark elf female, Chrisley, carefully expressed her opinion. My dungeon master, the potions have limitations. Interfere with life. Look at his eyes. It is still insufficient. Gurung, it was enough. He cried out sorrowfully. Lowering the tail showed he wasn't an enemy anymore. Look, that position shows he is prepared to jump. He is still able to do more. Still not giving up? At this rate, White really would die if he didn't abandon his pride. He turned around on his back, exposing his belly. Are you trying to take me off guard? That won't work. Finding faults. But White didn't like being weak. White couldn't easily accept weakness. In the end, it took 5 more bloody battles before he surrendered. White absolutely realized something. The sky above the sky. The true king. He wasn't a king. He was a beast that followed a king. The real king placed his sword back into the scabbard. Keying. Now their positions were determined. The dungeon master said to him, I need to use them as hounds. I made a plan using White and the saber tigers. There was abnormal proliferation, so I needed to keep the numbers as small as possible. They would be hunters, and a leader was needed for the hunters. The saber tigers were just one of the species proliferating. It would be a brutal task. However, maintaining the dungeon was necessary. It was indispensable for the ecosystem. Insufficient, but the rate of their progress couldn't keep up with the reproduction rate. He received an achievement in the middle, but an excellent achievement, a dungeon master without any sense. 2,000 creatures have been slaughtered. 200,000 PT will be paid. 800 achievement points will be added. Such minor achievements weren't important right now. I stood at a crossroad where the dungeon would either be maintained or lost. The saber tigers were referred to as the best hunters, but their actions weren't enough. I need to use the dungeon core to create a monster wave. If I couldn't fix it inside, then I needed to export them outside. I needed to act quickly. The number of creatures had already reached 7,000. The creatures randomly marched out of the dungeon. They had one command given to them. They could prey on everything around them. In addition, the creatures from the demons still monitoring the dungeon would be handled. My creatures were on an entirely different level. There were many creatures ranging from low grade to intermediate. However, the humans didn't take it lying down. Yu Un Hai and Edward Windsor were in the vanguard. I will kill all of you. Nuna, leave it to me. Both of them had improved by leaps and bounds. Especially Yu Un Hai, who had transformed in battle. She went on a crazy rampage among the creatures. Edward was also filled with negative feelings towards the creatures and easily dealt with the intermediate ones. Plus, the awakened in the guilds were rapidly growing. Humanity's enemy. Anger towards a common enemy. They adapted due to that drive. At the next meeting of Heaven's Will, Kim Yong-woo had a large sword by his side. We can win. We will win. They won't defeat us. That was the starting point. The hero who died. He blocked the creatures for them. The full-fledged threat changed them. The people of South Korea, the awakened, no longer stood still or ran away. Despite releasing a number of creatures, I knew that it was only a temporary measure. I could gain some room, but it wouldn't lead to permanent peace. The same problem would continue unless I removed the root cause. The propagation rate was steadily growing. The quality was never diminishing. Time passed. My anxiety reached peak levels. Yi didn't wake up and the light from the dungeon core was waning every day. Tree of Origin. I knew the cause. I knew but was unable to move my hand. However, I pulled out Wrath. Then I headed towards the Tree of Origin on the 15th floor. Dungeon Master, please calm yourself. There are other ways to solve it. Julium realized my intentions and knelt down before me. The tree was the representation of their desires. But it was no use. My patience was already dried up. Julium, I need to remove the cause of the side effects. This decision was long overdue. In fact, I should have moved quicker. Suik, Paysak, I brandished my sword. A corner of the Tree of Origin was cut down. Julium's body trembled and he grabbed my pants. Oh, no, please, please not the Tree of Origin. If the dungeon collapses, then there will be no tree. Don't block me. I will cut you both down if you continue acting like this. Coo! It was right at that moment. The tree of origin made a sound like it was screaming. It tried to defend itself. However, that was just wishful thinking. Pasazik. Hundreds of branches were cut down. I was using the skill Dark Sword so the severed objects didn't grow back. Coo! Shut up. I've endured it for as long as possible. This wouldn't have been necessary if you hadn't disturbed me. I had an indifferent expression. As I used my sword, Julium and the dark elves in the vicinity blocked their eyes and ears. They couldn't help shedding tears. The tree of origin was the source of their dreams and hope. The only sanctuary in this dungeon. Now it was being cut down indiscriminately. They couldn't block it. A sense of helplessness filled their bodies. I stopped to take a breath in the middle. My dungeon master. I found something. A person who can communicate with nature. Chrisley, who previously left the dungeon, had hastily returned. There was a small human girl with her. A human girl. She was approximately 9 years old? An existence that didn't fit in the dungeon. She didn't pay attention to any of the surrounding dark elves. The girl looked at the tree of origin and started weeping. Ah! The girl sat down close to the tree of origin and started embracing it. I realized straight away that the girl was an awakened. Dull eyes. I also recognized that she wasn't normal. Autistic? Yes. But she can communicate with nature. Chrisley showed her resolve in addressing this problem by leaving the dungeon. That was 2 weeks ago. Then this was her answer. I opened mind's eye. Name: Lee Sarong. Occupation hero. Nature person. Title: Asterisk comforted by nature. XU, magic power +8. Stats: Strength 21, Intelligence 3. Agility 15, Stamina 18. Magic power 55, +8. Potential: 114 +8, 425. Uniqueness: Intelligence is very low. Due to this, it is possible to communicate more closely with nature. Skill: Comfort, XU. Natural fairy tale. R. Nature communication, U. A familiar name. A familiar skill. Very high potential. Queen of benevolence. Just like Yu Un-hai had the name Lightning Queen, Lee Sarong was famous for her kindness. In the second half of the war, as the earth was driven to destruction and food became very low, humans started eating humans. The awakened couldn't easily believe in each other when Lee Sarong appeared. She used the powerful natural fairy tale skill and revived the land. Plants took root and started bearing fruit. As the food shortage was resolved, the awakened could use their power properly to strike back at the demons. That's why Lee Sarong was called Queen of Benevolence. Without hesitation, she equally spread love among humans. I knew she was a South Korean, but I didn't expect to encounter her in a place like this. Communicating with nature, Lee Sarong was definitely remarkable. She wasn't affected by the dungeon and only cared about the tree of origin. In addition, Lee Sarong had stopped the tree of origin from screaming. But won't it be difficult to converse if she has autism? It doesn't seem to solve our problem. She could communicate with nature, but there would be no way to tell me what it was saying. Chrisley expressed her opposition. She is unmistakably the key to solving this. My dungeon master, if given a bit more time. Chrisley's words were interrupted. Lee Sarong had placed one hand on the tree while the other one slapped her chest. It was like something was weighing down on her. I will give you a week. Analyze that child's behavior and figure out how to stop the tree. Thank you, my dungeon master. You will not be disappointed. Chrisley and Julium next to her sighed with relief. Saruk. I put away my sword and headed back up to the top floor. Exactly 1 week passed. I stood in front of the tree of origin while holding Yihi in one hand. Chrisley stood to my left and politely said to me, "The tree of origin is a necessary existence. Right now it can't control itself." Then Yihi? She is an origin spirit. Tashmal will testify. Tashmal started speaking. That's right. I thought it was strange at first. The tree of origin and origin spirit should pair with each other. I believe it is because she is still too young. I looked between Yihi and the tree of origin. Yihi is a fairy, similar to a spirit but clearly different. Perhaps there can be a substitute system? Spirits were born in the spirit world. By nature, a fairy took a long time to mature. Chrisley answered the obvious question. My dungeon master. The fairy is very special. She is linked to the dungeon core. That leads to a massive amount of magic power. It should be enough power to control the tree of origin. Okay, the method? The human girl's fairy tale skill. If you make the girl an intermediary role. Lee Sarong looked up at Yihi. She stretched out her hand like she was asking something. Do it well if you want to get out of here alive. I threatened while handing Yihi over. Yihi might be young, but she was still linked to the dungeon core. It was a privilege to be able to touch her spiritual body. Lee Sarong took Yihi and ran up to the tree of origin. She closed her eyes and instinctively used the natural fairy tale and nature communication skill. Kuu. The tree of origin gave a small cry. The resonance had begun. Chapter 106 to 108, Dungeon Destruction. Everyone in the area held their breaths. It was the same for me as well. I silently but intensely stared at Lee Sarong and Yihi. Lee Sarong was known as the Queen of Benevolence in my previous life. Chrisley had brought her. I didn't expect much, but she came up with a way to solve the problem with the tree of origin. Destiny? A bond? I didn't believe in such abstract things. Chrisley's contribution was large, but if the problem wasn't resolved or even grew, Lee Sarong wouldn't be able to escape responsibility, even if she had 425 potential. I wouldn't kill her, but a lot of pain would follow. I would make her lose her mind and turn her into a doll. However, she had to do it well. My dungeon master, this seems like it will take some time. You should relax while I protect this place. A day had passed. I shook my head at Chrisley's words. No, the process itself is very interesting. I can't miss this scene. It was also important. I had great interest in this matter, so I couldn't rest. A crisis might occur. For example, there might be a situation where the dungeon master's permission was required and I would need to handle it in real time. I could use the remaining capacities of the dungeon core from here. 2 days passed, then 3 days. Lee Sarong's body started to sway. She was 10 years old at the most. She managed to hold out without eating and drinking for 3 days. She had autism, but she was also the intermediary in the resonance between the tree of origin and Yihi. I couldn't break her concentration by bringing her something to eat. And after 1 more day, Kuu, the tree of origin trembled. The branches extended and embraced Yihi and Lee Sarong. It was the first time there was movement in the last 4 days. Everyone was focused. All the dark elves were holding their breaths as they watched the situation. I was no different. Soon the tree of origin completely embraced Lee Sarong and Yihi. The tree of origin has acknowledged the fairy of the dungeon core as soul companions. The tree of origin has become more complete. The fairy of the dungeon core has been promoted to origin fairy. A fairy has been successfully promoted for the first time. The origin fairy is present together with the tree of origin. The fairy will return to her original state if the tree of origin disappears. A decision. The compensation for the achievement is currently being calculated. 5,400,000 PT will be paid. 5,000 achievement points will be added. Excellent. It was the first time I had seen such high compensation. Yihi was also changing little by little. Her wings grew longer and her limbs became slightly more elongated. Her hair also grew. She was still chubby like a 1-year-old, but it seemed like she was feeling better. Yihi slowly opened her eyes in the heart of the tree of origin. She didn't seem to know how to express herself. Her eyes were glazed as she looked around. Then Yihi saw me and gave her silly smile. Yihi tilde. The abnormal growth stopped. As expected, it was a side effect from the tree of origin going out of control. Yihi was promoted and became more versatile. She could properly utilize the tree of origin to exert a strong physical force. For example, she could strengthen the roots or take advantage of it as materials for equipment. Oh, materials like this actually exist in the world. The dwarves were excited. They could create things from mysterious materials. At the very least, the equipment would be rare grade. Some unique rated items might even emerge. A lot of the leaves. It will be helpful in raising the angels. And that wasn't all. The original tree of origin only had a small number of leaves. But the leaves doubled in an instant after communicating with Yihi. I gave them to Tashmal and they could also be used as potion ingredients. The leaves from the tree had a strong healing effect. Taking them in the long term would also cause stats to rise. Thanks to repetitively taking them, I managed to increase intelligence by 2. Master, Yihi will give you a gift. Yihi. It is a strange-looking bead. Yi approached while I was checking the status of the dungeon. The bead was the size of a thumbnail but gave off an abnormal amount of magic power. It isn't strange, Yi asked. This is the essence of origin. It can be created once every year. It is very good to eat. There was something like this? It was something that the tree of origin could only create once a year. I opened mind's eye. Name, essence of origin. Description. An essence created by the tree of origin that is filled with 1 year's worth of magic power. It is almost impossible for the gods to obtain, so even they consider it a special occasion. Asterisk. After taking it, the maximum potential limit will increase by 1. Break through the limit. I looked at the essence closely. I knew what it meant by increasing the maximum potential. The potential threshold of a demon was 500. All stats could reach exactly 100 points. After reaching 100, a huge difference would be felt even if it only rose by 1. In my previous life, the Grand Dukes broke through the limit. But I didn't know the method. Of course, they couldn't have made the breakthrough using the essence of origin. Other methods were used. The essence of origin is one of the solutions to breaking through the limit. I nodded. This was important information. I didn't need this right now, but Adonis? He unfortunately reached his maximum potential and would find it hard to raise his stats even further. I could trade this with Adonis. It is an important key. The corners of my mouth rose. Good job, Yi. Then please stroke Yi's head. Yi stuck out her head. I hesitated for a moment before petting Yi's head. Yi was more pampered after she became the origin fairy. I wasn't as restrained anymore and stopped hiding my feelings. Yi, I like this. Yi will now go walk the bees. Yi laughed and flew off with red cheeks. I looked down at my hand. Origin fairy. Despite this status, Yi was still Yi. The flesh was hungry. He occupied himself eating soil and grass. After passing through insects and mice, he realized they tasted better. Since then, he went to find living things. Over time, he became bigger until he realized that humans were the most delicious meal. He gobbled up a whole village of humans. He ate. Delicious. Then all the humans around him were eaten. He returned to the original place. A big castle. It wasn't easy to enter the dungeon. Due to his size, the entrance was blocked. It was necessary to increase the size of the entrance. He ate the walls. By the way, there was a hint of sweetness. The dungeon barrier. It wrapped around the outside of the dungeon and was tasty. The flesh started absorbing the dungeon barrier. This damn flesh should get lost. Pacon greedily stomped his feet. A strange flesh was attached to the dungeon barrier and he received a warning message. The durability was going down by the minute. But it was hard to launch attacks against the flesh. He just recovered and actually increased in size. This was due to his 130 points in stamina. It would be nice if he could use a scroll to move the flesh to another location. Pacon greedily crossed his arms and frowned. Barrier durability 410,233 1/millionths. Damn it, kill it. He mobilized all his creatures. But the flesh finally fell. The flesh couldn't absorb all the attacks from the creatures. Ha ha ha. This tenacious brat, he finally died. After days of struggling, infinite flesh was finally killed. Pacon greedily laughed out loud. The damage was considerable and the barrier eventually destroyed, but he thought killing the flesh was more important. But Pacon greedily had no idea of one thing. When the barrier had shattered, a message window flashed in front of all awakened. The message window came out of nowhere. The awakened who saw it were puzzled. The dungeon barrier located in Saudi Arabia has been broken. The barrier will take 30 days to recover. What is this? Barrier? Isn't there a dungeon in Saudi Arabia? The awakened were able to figure out the meaning of the message. There were all types of comments from the awakened community, including some credible views. There is no need to enter the dungeon to take care of the creatures. Previously all physical attacks didn't work in the dungeon. That barrier blocking it is now gone? The government dispatched troops to the dungeon in Saudi Arabia and received news that firepower worked. The dungeon is collapsing. No way. You mean it is true? It wasn't CG? Oh my god. The creatures have come pouring out. It is like they're terrified. Baby, are we going to just watch? Now if the time for the heroes to take action. The awakened felt hope as they saw the dungeon crumbling. All their suffering had finally paid off. The crowd of awakened started moving. Some were gunning for the benefits within the dungeon, but the emphasis was placed on destruction. I heard the news a little late. 24 hours a day was insufficient to manage the dungeon's internal affairs and work out the mess with the Tree of Origin. Li Surong solved the issue, but there were still many things to worry about. I only knew about the situation after Krasla went outside. The barrier is broken? It must be Paka Grioli's dungeon. That's right. Krasla raised his chin and confirmed it. It can't be a coincidence. Did Infinite Flesh eat the barrier? I moved him outside. If not, the barrier in my dungeon probably would have been the one that was destroyed. In the first place, wasn't it difficult for the angels to slash at the barrier? I hadn't expected that Infinite Flesh would destroy it so quickly. The South Korean guilds are also moving. In particular, the Devil Hunters raid group that had some success in the dungeon forays. The barrier is gone, so the dungeon is vulnerable. But it is reckless. The exterior of the dungeon and its contents were different, but they were linked to each other. The barrier had disappeared, so the dungeon floors would be compressed. For example, the original 30 floors would be reduced to 3. This difference was really huge. In addition, there was a difference in the movements of the creatures. After the barrier was restored, the dungeon would take 3 months to recover. However, the level of each awakened wasn't that high. It would be easy in 4 to 5 years, but right now, they would be exterminated. Pakan Grioli, he was still a duke. I thought of a number of variables before opening my mouth. I'm going to move. Be prepared. The people will follow master. Krasla hurriedly kneeled down. Pakan Grioli, one of the dukes belonging to Grand Duke Upa's faction. His personality was aggressive and easily excited. After being deserted by Grand Duke Upa after the auction incident, he had been thinking of how stupid he was. Of course, he could increase his investments in the dungeon due to being denied entry to the Demon World auction. He got quite a few accomplishments due to that. The quality of his creatures wasn't bad. Rather, it seemed like he belonged to one of the leading groups. There was just one problem. Infinite Flesh. He was simple and moved in slow patterns but had superior stamina. Pakan Grioli sacrificed thousands of creatures in order to get rid of it. It was reminiscent of a slime, but the stamina and size couldn't be compared. As a result, it took 2 months to kill him. 24 hours. He didn't rest for even 1 second. Pakan never imagined that it would be so hard to attack. But the damage was too severe. In addition, he used all the points he collected. He even failed to keep the barrier. Pakan Grioli felt like the situation was urgent. He wouldn't be able to stop other demons from invading. But the humans unexpectedly started attacking. These damn humans. Pakan Grioli ground his teeth together. The exterior wall of the dungeon has been destroyed. The 37-floor dungeon has been reduced to 4 floors. 671 creatures have died from the overlapping spaces. The creatures are confused and have started to escape from the dungeon. Kung, Cuckoo Kung. The dungeon shook relentlessly. Keek, Kiek. Due to the barrier disappearing, the authority of the dungeon core had weakened. The creatures with low intelligence were forced out of the dungeon. Pakan Grioli clenched his fists with rage. These mere humans. The weak. They would already be gone if it wasn't for his mercy. He used his creatures to completely destroy the powerful weapons that the humans used. He lost a lot of creatures, but he was still a duke. The number of creatures was sufficient for ordinary human opponents. But that wasn't the end. He destroyed the firepower, but a large number of awakened started moving. They were constantly striking. The awakened gathered from various parts of the world, starting moving towards his dungeon. It would be okay if it was just the awakened. They were just ordinary humans carrying weapons. The soldiers from South Korea were different. If the barrier was functioning normally, then products of modern civilization would be useless in the dungeon. The barrier was now gone, so the magic power wasn't working properly. The weak creatures died before the various weapons. The strong creatures were unable to cope with the vast majority of attacks. Swept away. The humans reached the 2nd floor in a few days. There was still the 3rd floor, and he was waiting on the 4th floor. I will kill all of you. Pakan Grioli growled out fiercely. Slowly move forward. Protect the soldiers. The awakened from all over the world. Among them was Heaven's Will from South Korea. They wore magic jewelry to communicate with each other. The United States and China followed behind them. There were some complaints, but it was unavoidable since Devil Hunters was the most famous raid group. This was a dungeon. They had to stick together. And a leader was needed. A tacit agreement occurred. Of course, there were many awakened who refused to obey commands from heaven's will. Now those awakened were screaming from all over the place. The captain of devil hunters, I heard that he died? Now it is just a mere raid group. Shouldn't those from China be leading? That's right, only the semblance of the raid group is leading us? How funny. And there were people complaining who ignored the screams. In particular, the ones from China were really noisy. They wanted to use this opportunity to take down a dungeon. The Black Society didn't want to lose to South Korea. The Black Society wanted to take the lead. What, only a semblance? Yu Un-hai couldn't tolerate it anymore and complained to the guild master of Heaven's Will, Kim Yong-woo. Quiet, it isn't good to argue inside a dungeon. We need to be united in this place. Please don't cause an argument. The division continued. It was a long-awaited opportunity to surpass Heaven's Will. Kim Yong-woo had a lot of worries after the death of the captain of devil hunters. He was able to maintain his presence as guild master due to that existence. But the people twisted around him like hyenas once the captain of devil hunters died. He had to run every day. There was also strong pressure from outside. I am lacking. He inwardly laughed bitterly. Kim Yong-woo wasn't strong. There were stronger people overflowing in the guild. They were obviously greedy for the position of guild master. In this society, preferences were given to the strong. The weak were left behind. Kim Yong-woo was barely hanging on. I have to use this opportunity to resurrect myself. I need to survive in Heaven's Will. He could redeem himself right now. Destroying the dungeon, he needed to be the leader of this task. Then he would gain greater power for himself. He needed to control all movements. Failure? He didn't want to imagine it. There were those trying to pull him down. Devil hunters discovering the dwarf village on the 7th floor was a great accomplishment, but he was likely to lose all that influence if this was a failure. However, the Black Society was still noisy. Bah, the guild master is a scarecrow. Be careful with your mouth. Now isn't the time to find faults with each other. What, are you accusing me of something? If you're not scared, then open your mouth. Ha ha ha. They were obviously full of derision. Kim Yong-woo felt desperate. He pushed down his anger. He couldn't dance to their tune. This isn't the place. Or have you gone crazy from losing so many lives? At any rate, these guys. But the other South Korean guilds didn't tolerate it. In particular, the Mithril Guild consisted of many young people without any patience. Japan and the United States were quiet but secretly jumped on the bandwagon. They stared at the Chinese. All members of the Black Society laughed. Watch your mouths. Do you want to fight? Hey, you don't have anything to say, so you want to settle it with violence? The guilds confronted each other. Stop. Kim Yong-woo squeezed in between them while sighing inwardly. They needed to help each other instead of fighting. The future was dark. This was only the 2nd floor, but more creatures would appear. Kururung, Kung, and his prediction was correct. Twin-head ogres, Cerberus, dozens of ice trolls, and hundreds of other creatures. You dare invade my dungeon? Humans, don't even think about leaving here alive. Pagan Grioli was in the center. The battle was intense. The situation wasn't good. The awakened could handle the general creatures, but the number of soldiers dying wasn't a joke. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were dying while the awakened were struggling. Screams, and more screams. But the number of creatures was also rapidly reducing. In particular, the South Korean awakened were dazzling. The South Korean awakened as a whole were on a much higher level and could handle the advanced creatures. Even the quality of the items they were using was different. Each awakened was wearing some unique rated armor. They could deal blows to the advanced creatures to some extent. Damn, is he the dungeon master? Kim Yong-woo's body trembled. Yes, they could deal with the number of creatures gathered here. However, there was one person. He had a strong presence and commanded the creatures. Long, sharp nails, teeth that were reminiscent of a wolf. He was terrifying in battle as he grabbed and awakened and destroyed them. An entirely different class. They weren't his opponent. The twin-head ogres were difficult, but he was on a completely different level. It made sense if he was the dungeon master. But still, it was beyond common sense. Cough. Line up. Don't give, act. He couldn't be seen. An afterimage. He came close to them in the blink of an eye. Kill him. Just kill him. The quick-witted awakened soon noticed that he was the king of the dungeon. In the end, they were no match. Some attacks were successful, but they were stopped at the level of the clothes. In contrast, the awakened were torn apart by his nails. What should we do? What to do? Kim Yong-woo fell into a state of panic. Too strong. Despite being prepared, in reality they couldn't do anything against him. How many people needed to be sacrificed to catch him? 1,000? 10,000? His spirit became dull at the thought. One thing was for certain, everyone in the dungeon might be wiped out. They would become victims of the creatures. Nuna, Yoon-hai's side was grazed. She quickly used electric current to buy some time. Edward was aware of the situation and aimed his sword. But he could only swing it a few times. Edward had his chest pierced and collapsed to the ground. Cough. The two most prominent people in Heaven's Will. It was fortunate that they weren't instantly killed. Of course, it was only a matter of time at this rate. No. Kim Yong-woo pulled out his sword. They were the main backbone of devil hunters. His power was lower than theirs, and they would be the center of Heaven's Will in the future. He couldn't lose them here to the creatures. The dungeon master gave a cold laugh. He stretched out his nails and tried to take the lives of the two people lying on the ground. And, just before he killed them, Kwa-ru-ru-rung. In the dungeon, a thunder dragon poured down. Tens of thousands of people had entered the dungeon. They had divided into groups with their own goals, and only a few thousands remained alive at best. Survival? It was a ridiculous thought. The creatures were persistent. It was impossible to deal with them even if the groups combined. After some large-scale battles, some guilds in the Black Society left the battlefield. Some felt there was no hope and retreated from the dungeon. Dog scum. The remaining awakened felt nauseous. In the end, they used the people following them as shields. The Black Society deliberately left the battlefield to climb up the dungeon. They intended to monopolize all the benefits before disposing of the remaining creatures. A tacit agreement. However, those were just words. In reality, the awakened couldn't help feeling resentment. They had varying nationalities and just met, so they couldn't trust each other. It was a mere formal procedure. The awakened from different countries were like cats and dogs. The soldiers also moved according to their own benefit. This division made them vulnerable. At first glance, it seemed like the battlefield was tilting towards one side. The largest contributor to this was naturally the dungeon master. Overwhelming strength. He seemed like a god. The awakened tried to step back but were too late. The creatures surrounded them from every direction. They should have escaped from the beginning, just like some guilds in the Black Society. There was no more hope. Each of the awakened could feel it. The situation was urgent and they would soon be wiped out. Only screams could be heard as they lost hope. Help me. The sharp nails tore apart bodies. His eyes were dark and relaxed hands clutched the weapon. Little by little, things were tipping to the dungeon master's side. There was no way to reverse this. Shawahahik. All of the awakened felt despair. At that moment, someone rushed through the creatures from the direction of the dungeon entrance. A red spear tore through the creatures. Krasla. He quickly squeezed through dozens of creatures. What was going on? That question was in everyone's eyes. But the doubts didn't last long. This was a critical situation. There is a breach. The problem remained about whether to fight or retreat. Retreat. Fall back. The soldiers were the first to leave. They verified that the strength of the opponent was too much. The soldiers were more concerned about getting away from Saudi Arabia. The guilds from other countries also started stampeding away. The person wielding the spear was strong, but that was it. It wasn't enough to revive the dying hope. They were lacking something in their chests. But there was no escape. The Koreans in the front. The wounded. A few guilds. They were abandoned. The light had completely disappeared, and in its place was death. However, Dubuk, a man holding a sword, wearing a black, half-skull mask. He made his way to the center. The area around him seemed to be blurred by a strange haze and he drew the attention of everyone around him. As every eye turned towards him, the man raised his hand. Cheek. Kwa-ru-ru-rung. At the same time, lightning swallowed up the dungeon master. Yoon-hai's mouth gaped open. The current situation was beyond her understanding. A familiar appearance. He was wielding the sword but it was still unbelievable. Captain Nim, She couldn't say it properly because of the deep cuts. But Yu Un-hai saw it. She clearly saw it. She wasn't mistaken. His whole body might be blurred, but she couldn't forget that proud stance. A man that appeared whenever there was despair. In the past, he was the rising star of Heaven's will and Yu Un-hai's guide. After his death at the hands of the creatures, Heaven's will had held a crisis meeting of how to handle it. As well as, Yu Un-hai had some serious problems regarding it. Randolph Briggseel, he died. Everyone thought he was dead. He was seriously injured and dragged into the dungeon with the angel. Yu Un-hai believed in him, but he didn't come out alive. She cried while holding the memorial service. More than a year had passed since Randolph Briggseel became her leader. The only person she would follow. Since then, she was always expanding the horizon of her limitations. A man who always disappeared then suddenly reappeared. Deep in her heart, she always thought he would return. But she had dismissed it as a delusion every time the thought entered her head. Then, he returned. He came here alive. Once again when everyone was in trouble. When their lives were at risk. He once again showed up with a blasé face. Yu Un-hai couldn't see half his face, but she could imagine it. He would be coldly smiling. He would address all problems like it was exciting. Take this. It is a very precious potion, but Master commanded me to pass it to you. Treat the child next to you. Krasla, holding the red spear, was suddenly next to her. She only saw him a few times as he always followed the captain. He passed her a potion that had small leaves floating in it. The finest potion made using the leaves from the tree of origin. It was slightly weaker than an elixir, but it had excellent recovery abilities. It could heal a person even if only half the body was alive. Yu Un-hai accepted the potion. She treated Edward first. Edward's status was a lot worse than hers. She poured the potion and the wounds healed in the blink of an eye. An instant effect. She turned her head with surprise. Is there a way to win? That isn't worth answering. Krasla turned his body. He joined the battlefield. It was cruel, but that cruelty was already like an answer. That's right. Isn't it obvious that there is a way to win? There was a smile on Yu Un-hai's face. She didn't feel any more pain after pouring the potion on her wound. Frankly, she had been having a hard time. No matter how hard Li Ji-hai tried, it was impossible to fill his shoes. Confidence came flooding in. Thank you for being alive. You. Pakan Grioli's eyes widened. It seemed like he recognized Krasla and I. There was no significant correlation. In this situation, I had taken measures to prevent my identity from leaking. I arranged my powerful creatures around the dungeon. By now, they had probably reached the top floor of the dungeon. The guardian protecting the dungeon core would be simple to handle. The humans were an issue, but this would be a one-time experience. Pakan Grioli's power was no match for me. After processing Pakan Grioli, I would also need to deal with Kim Yong-woo. The humans had withdrawn like it was low tide. There were only a few remaining here. Half of them were South Koreans. Although I couldn't completely block their mouths, it was possible to conceal the situation. Of course, not all of them would be able to survive. It has been a while. I laughed coldly. I wore a rare grade ring called Strange Echoes that distorted the sound in the environment. In other words, not many of the people here would be able to guess who I was. So I didn't need to worry about the conversation being heard. Quack. I brandished wrath. Pakan Grioli narrowly missed getting injured and said, "Why are you here? No, why are you helping the humans? I don't know what you are talking about. My purpose for coming here is only you." Pakan Grioli. Their hands didn't stop moving. Nails scraped against a sword in a situation that seemed equal. But there was a difference in their expressions. Pakan Grioli frowned and said, "You are aiming for me? Huh, how funny. You are still drunk on the glory of the past and aren't aware of your position. Right now, you are my food." I opened mind's eye. The status window soon surfaced in front of me. Name. Pakan Grioli. Occupation Demon Duke. Dungeon Master. Title * King of Wolves. XU. Agility and Strength +4. * Slaughterer. XU. Agility and Strength +4. Stats. Strength 87. +8. Intelligence 75. Agility 79. +8. Stamina 72. Magic Power 78. Potential 390 + 16/500. Uniqueness The Master of Grioli, the Barren Land of Wolves. Skill. The Last Wolf, Epic, Revival, XU, Viciousness, U. Relative comparison. Pagan Grioli. Strength 95, Intelligence 75, Agility 87, Stamina 72, Magic 78, Potential 390 plus 16 500ths. Randolph Brigzeal. Strength 95, Intelligence 81, Agility 90, Stamina 85, Magic 96, Potential 396 plus 51 500ths. Pagan Grioli had quite a steep growth compared to before. His titles and skills also increased. But I still had superior total strength. Thanks to the Emperor's sword stimulating the heart of the Hell Monarch, I gained 2 points in intelligence and a further 2 points from drinking the potions made by the leaves of the Tree of Origin for a month. Therefore, I wasn't lacking in intelligence. That is just casual talk. Come, I will show you the proper Pagan Grioli. His body started to change. The Last Wolf, Epic, skill was activated. Grr. Soon Pagan Grioli had turned into a 3-meter blue wolf. A dignified presence that filled the area. I pulled out one more sword. It was the radiantly shining Emperor's sword. Although I wasn't familiar with dual swords, the Ego sword was steady in my hand. It felt like the sword was waking up in my hands. The option attached meant it could never be destroyed. It would keep stimulating the heart of the Hell Monarch the more I used it. So now I used it in conjunction with Wrath. You are a good opponent to practice against. I violently collided with the wolf Pagan Grioli. 2 swords in my hands. I had no constraints. The fight was over. Krasla was helping the awakened against the incoming creatures. Some people felt hope and started to become more active. Thanks to that, I was able to relax and enjoy the fight against Pagan Grioli. A Grand Duke was needed. A mere Duke wouldn't be able to beat me. A message window flashed. Great achievement. Duke, Pagan Grioli's dungeon has been destroyed. 1 residual point has been awarded. 1,500,000 PT will be paid. 1,100 achievement points will be added. My creatures had succeeded in destroying the dungeon core. The barrier was already destroyed, so the dungeon was useless. It would take too long to recover. It was only a matter of time before it was the target of other demons or humans. Investing in it would just damage me. Grr. Pagan Grioli panicked. He placed his most powerful creatures near the dungeon core, so he never imagined it would fall so easily. Quang. Quaquang. The dungeon started to crumble. Rocks fell from the ceiling and threatened everyone. But I was still pushing against Pagan Grioli. Gerwang. I didn't try to escape. In fact, this situation was rather nice. I would be driven to extreme limits while fighting Pagan Grioli, so it was an invaluable experience. Pagan Grioli. This will be your grave. It was time to end this. Kuuong. Pagan Grioli collapsed. He lost his leg and his heart was stabbed. The wolf features started disappearing, but his body was already dead. Great achievement. The hunt of Duke, Pagan Grioli, has succeeded. 1 residual point has been awarded. 1,500,000 PT will be paid. 1,100 achievement points will be added. He received the same achievements for destroying the dungeon core. Then Krasla cut off Pagan Grioli's head with his spear. It was a contingency measure against advanced healing. The severed head rolled across the ground. My condition wasn't okay. Krasla's body was also a wreck. My stamina was a little low and there were multiple wounds in several areas. I pushed myself to the limits while fighting Pagan Grioli. I wanted to practice dual swordsmanship, so I had pushed myself. My technique would rise in more dangerous situations. This was my own belief learned from the battlefields in my past. Captain Nim. Members of Heavens Will including Yu Un-hai and Kim Yong-woo came up to me. The people from other guilds were also slowly moving to their feet. However, I held out a hand and stopped them. White, Black, the other Saber Tigers and the Spartwa appeared at that moment. The remaining humans were forced to freeze. I was injured. All the awakened also had serious injuries. They judged that it would be impossible to fight in this state. I moved while holding my dual swords. And I stood in a position to save my guild members. The standoff lasted a few moments. Soon after, the creature's claws and fangs took the lives of some awakened. We have to help them. Stay back. There will be greater damage if we move in. I blocked Yu Un-hai before she could run out. She bit her lips but stopped moving. She needed to think objectively or it was highly likely she would lose her life. In the end, Yu Un-hai could only stand back with tight fists. After a while, the creatures left the dungeon. Great, I nodded. This was also part of my plan. It was better to have fewer witnesses. I had killed a duke. Of course, this story leaking still wouldn't cause significant problems. I was already a symbol and now I had resurrected during the dungeon destruction event. It was evident from Qin Yong-woo's face. Thanks to this, my name would spread a little further. Quickly, time is running out to leave the dungeon. Kururung. The dungeon was slowly collapsing. The rest of the guild followed behind me. Chapter 109 to 111 Party. Heaven's Will. Located in the heart of Gangnam, it was truly the best guild in South Korea. No one could disagree with this. Kim Yong-woo's eyes were teary. He had all sorts of worries while attacking the dungeon in Saudi Arabia, but they were now gone. He had returned. These words were enough. Captain Nim, Wurak. Yu Un-hai hugged me as soon as the plane descended. She had been quiet for the last few days, but that stopped the moment she stepped foot on South Korean soil. I stayed still and looked around. Everybody was looking at me with a curious expression. There were a number of reporters requesting an interview but I ignored them. The atmosphere was quiet as they waited for me to speak. Guild Master, I will return for a talk. I could see the reporters preparing to write in advance. Therefore I only spoke quietly to Kim Yong-woo. I look forward to it. Kim Yong-woo gave a huge smile. He originally had to defend his position with a dignified attitude, but now life was good. I didn't mind. Edward Windsor, who was quietly standing behind Yu Un-hai, said, "This is the last time. I won't forgive you if you make Nuna cry one more time. You've developed a lot of affection in the meantime. Nuna is my benefactor. I will give my life to her. I was the one who saved him, but didn't Yu Un-hai nurse him back to health?" I started laughing. Am I not welcome? It is better than nothing. As long as Un-hai Nuna laughs. Edward gazed at Yu Un-hai admiringly. Edward's beginning and end seemed to be Yu Un-hai. He won't be able to escape. In a nutshell, Edward was forced to follow me as long as Yu Un-hai did. Over time, his obsession with her would just deepen. One of the 10 mighty heroes in the future had fallen. I didn't need to worry about him becoming an unexpected obstacle. As long as the growth rate wasn't bad, he would be able to face a higher level of creatures in the next 3 years. Please be prepared. There is a lot of work in the world these days. This is only the first dungeon destroyed. Kim Yong-woo said playfully. Lee Ji-hai sighed. It will be hard to rest in the next few months. We should take today as an opportunity for a break. I deliberately told the reporters to leave so that we could rest. The other raid members stretched out and exclaimed, "Wah, home, bed, I want to eat my mother's stew." A private bus to carry the people arrived. Yu Un-hai was still stuck to me like gum as I boarded the bus. The jealousy in Edward's eyes became much stronger. I didn't bother stopping it. But I had to remove her by force after arriving at Gangnam. "Ah, I want to keep hugging you." Yu Un-hai tearfully protested. "Tomorrow. Bah, we'll see. You aren't going to disappear tomorrow?" I had left them too frequently. The bus stopped and Kim Yong-woo was waiting for me. Yu Un-hai wasn't concerned despite everyone staring at her. "That won't happen for a while. Are you sure? Trust me." "Hung, I don't believe you. Promise with your finger." "Tomorrow." I walked out while ignoring her finger. Kim Yong-woo laughed as Yu Un-hai shouted louder. "You really have to come tomorrow. Don't disappear again without telling us. Or else I will burn your badge." The next day, there was a wall of humans outside the guild house. Numerous reporters. It was to celebrate the return of a hero. And there was a crowd of awakened who knew about my resurrection. But I didn't show my face to them. There were some personal details that I kept secret. I always wore a half-skull mask outside, so Kim Yong-woo also paid a lot of attention to security. However, I couldn't just ignore them. There was an intense curiosity about how I managed to come back from the dungeon alive. I had a private interview with a reporter that was revealed to the public. The interview was taped and broadcasted by the stations, embroiling South Korea in a huge storm once again. "Hello, please introduce yourself. I am the captain of the raid group Devil Hunters that belongs to Heaven's Will, Randolph Briggseel. It is a pleasure to meet Captain Randolph Nim. Then I'll get straight to the point. Several months ago, the angels emerged and creatures gathered in South Korea. I heard that Randolph Nim received a large injury from the creatures and was dragged into the dungeon. Is that true? That's right. I was dragged into the dungeon along with the angel. It is amazing. Can you tell me what happened afterwards? I met the dungeon master. Yes, I met the dungeon master. Are you talking about the woman with long ears that appeared with the monster wave? That's right. The dungeon master was very curious and healed me. She directly healed you? It is true. She is strong but was bored waiting on the top floor. Therefore, she hoped that I would relieve some of that. I would have died if left untreated. I remember. The words of the dungeon master spread throughout the country. At that time, Randolph Nim's attack was a huge issue. Then the angel that came with you. The dungeon master isn't good. She came up with a devilish way to corrupt the angel. My body trembled as I saw the scene. A fallen angel, huh? It is unbelievable. Did anything special happen? I was able to explore the dungeon. Is that really possible? The dungeon master gave you permission? That's right, but it was up to the 15th floor. The creatures became stronger and the terrain changed as I climbed higher. In some cases, I found ridiculously powerful treasures compared to those downstairs. The top floor is the 31st floor. The dungeon master seems to be very interested in the affairs of humans. Wait a minute, isn't the dungeon master controlling the creatures? It is impossible to control them all, and they might be helpful to the further growth of the awakened. Perhaps, a monster wave will occur in the near future. Things are becoming more bleak. Did she mention what she wants from us humans? Increase our strength, and handle the other dungeons. The dungeon master hopes for the level of the awakened to rise. Beyond that, I don't know. But the dungeon master is very strict. She gave me one last warning. A chance like this won't happen again. I don't know how far you can grow. Even now, the average citizens see the awakened as Superman. Climb the dungeon. That road is faster than anything else. And, the dungeon core is a powerful weapon. Think of this as a chance. Ah, I heard that Saudi Arabia's dungeon also collapsed. Heaven's Will and Randolph Nim contributed a lot to it. I've never heard of a dungeon core. It contains the magic power that maintains the dungeon. We searched for it the day after killing the owner, but there were no signs of the dungeon core. Wait, so the dungeon master in Saudi Arabia was killed? That's right. Of course, I wasn't alone. It wouldn't have been possible without the help of others. That's why some of the awakened died. Yes, that is regrettable. In particular, none of the awakened from China seem to have survived. They were surprised in the middle. It can't be helped. Everyone gathered there was different. Our deepest sympathies. But if it was possible to destroy Saudi Arabia's dungeon then, here in South Korea. That is impossible. South Korea's dungeon master is different. I don't even dare think of wielding a sword against her. Every dungeon master has different traits. It is still monumental. One of the 72 dungeons has been destroyed, so humanity finally has hope. If every awakened grows quickly, then it will be possible to protect the peace on Earth. These are trials. Trials to make humans grow. Thank you for the good words. And thank you for your time today. This was the end of the interview. It lasted approximately 5 minutes. But the duration didn't matter. It contained a lot of information. The captain of Devil Hunters was now the symbol of resurrection. The dungeon floors, fallen angels, monster wave and existence of the dungeon core. All of this was amazing. The interview flowed all over the world. At the same time, the world's giants started to move. Their eyes were headed towards South Korea. A half-dungeon core. It was broken due to white, but the light showed that there was still some concentration of magic power. The fairy had gone back to its original nature. I left the half-dungeon core with the best blacksmiths. The Dwarf Blacksmith Guild, blacksmith, frequently made goods for humans. This belonged to a duke, so only unique or even exceptional unique grade items can be made from the dungeon core. Rather, it is better to use this politically. This was the result of several calculations. In particular, the weapons would be used to strengthen Kim Yong-woo and Heaven's Will. There was no one using exceptional unique, XU, weapons among the humans. It was likely that an astronomical sum would be spent for them. I turned my eyes to the outside. Oh, I can't go out. This is really frustrating. Yu Un-hai slumped down. The reporters in the last few days were to blame. Therefore she was stuck in the guild house. Any member that went out there would be engulfed by the curious humans. Go away. It is too hot. Ah, Captain Nim is good. I wouldn't be able to walk through so many brutes. I will be honest. Yoon Hai was strongly attached to my side. She was more aggressive after I returned back alive. The person who would be called Lightning Queen in the future. There was also the bonus of making the indifferent Edward Windsor annoyed. That's right, isn't there a party today? Are you wearing a suit? There was a huge guild party scheduled to take place this evening. It had occurred a few times, but this was the first time I was participating. It was expected that the guild masters and other important figures would attend. Yoon Hai continued to babble like a sparrow. I've made a lot of money in the meantime. I'll give some to you. How about it? There is no need. Don't be like that. You're coming, yes? You are the only one who can make the reporters move. I wouldn't even be able to move 200 meters without you. I didn't bother with a lot of words. Kim Yong-woo had already grabbed the back of my neck. A suit. I didn't have a lot of time to find one due to the dungeon. I lightly nodded and stood up. At that time, the creatures that left on the expedition returned. White entered the dungeon with a weary countenance. But he was still asked about the spoils by Yi. An unusual creature. Vast amounts of magic power that couldn't be seen anywhere else. A very good master. Even White was completely subservient. Why is this flesh so small? Yi asked White with a frown. He was only the size of a fist, but he was clearly infinite flesh. The reduced infinite flesh was wriggling around. He looked like a slime. Pant. White was playing with the flesh. Then Yi shouted, Gigi, White, don't bite him. White placed the flesh back on the ground. Yi was worried. She didn't know what to do with this one. He was smaller, so didn't look as dangerous as he did in the past. His power was weakened, so he didn't seem able to put up much resistance. This isn't a problem that Yi can determine the answer to. I will ask Master when he comes back. Yi's became more thoughtful after changing into an origin fairy. But her nature still hadn't changed. I will play with him until then. Yi gave an even smile and started poking the flesh. Yoon Hai dragged me to a store selling formal wear and started using me as a mannequin. Ah, this looks cool. Shall we try one more change? It is already the 5th one. At first I had suffered through it, but now I couldn't see any end. Yoon Hai was looking at me like I was an appetizing piece of meat. However, it wasn't tiring for the store employees. Guest Nim. I think that Guest Nim's ratio fits well with this striped suit tilde. Omo, that is totally my taste. Captain Nim, change quickly. Come on, or what about this navy suit? Don't you have good sense? I love everything you bring. If you just wear this once. I was tired, especially of the female employees. I gave a small sigh as I tried on the clothes. It was rare for demons to socialize with humans, but it suited my purpose to fit in with them. In addition, I had never been to a party. I was ignorant about human parties. In this situation, it would be wiser to follow someone else. Yoon Hai showed similar behavior every time I wore a suit. Good job, she gave a thumbs up. The staff also looked at me with admiration. I was considered handsome to both demons and humans, so I was familiar with such gazes. It was inconsequential to me. I was only freed after trying on 20 suits. Ah, all of them are my favorites. What do you think? Yoon Hai gazed at all the suits. But she only worried about it for a short time. Yoon Hai gave up and said, I don't know. Let's just get all of them. Isn't that excessive spending? I asked Yoon Hai. Captain Nim, I have a lot of money. There is enough for 3 generations, so I can spend this much. Don't worry, right, this was what she earned by putting her life at risk. Yoon Hai was one of the strongest members of Heaven's Will. It was natural that she would rake in money. She took care of creatures around the world. Due to that, the good treatment that she received soared. I was convinced as the laughing Yoon Hai headed for the cash register. How should I calculate it? A lump sum. What about shipping? Can you deliver it by 6 tonight? Gangnam. Of course. I'll express send it. Then the shipping, please send it here. She didn't give the address to the Heaven's Will Guildhouse. I was confused and asked, isn't that the cafe I rented the other time? I bought the building a month ago. Yoon Hai casually replied. The cafe was a place where the raid group members could gather. It was easier to purchase it. I was a little concerned about her spending. When I first met Yoon Hai, she lived a simple life. The fact that she bought an entire building was a remarkable change. Any man who marries me will be truly blessed. I am young, pretty and have some abilities. Yoon Hai playfully said. I ignored her and said, let's go now. Yoon Hai just laughed like she expected the answer and nodded after glancing at the clock on the wall. Come to think of it, there is no time. We need to buy shoes. Don't they need to match the suit? The shopping trip wasn't over yet. We hurriedly returned to the guild after a 4-hour shopping trip. An amazing sight at first glance. A mansion with a big yard. A few raid members were watching with gaping mouths. This was where the party was taking place. There were dozens of guards at the entrance to strictly monitor admittance. But I already received an invitation from the leader and could easily pass through the entrance. Wow, it is so big. How much money do you need to live in a house like this? You will never know. I am still developing. No one knows how far I might develop. Just watch. Lee Ji Hai and Yoon Hai were slightly overwhelmed by the sight. Spacious grounds that were at least 1,000 pyong. There was only one house, but it was the size of a mansion. People were walking past manicured lawns. Gardeners had also trimmed unfamiliar trees. Please be careful not to leave the path. A female receptionist who was guiding us said, we couldn't step off the path onto the grass. Kim Yong-woo, Yoon Hai and Lee Ji Hai following behind her flinched and tried to make themselves smaller. Despite being the guild master of Heavenswool, he still wasn't familiar with situations like this. The only ones who weren't affected were me and Kim Tae-won. Kim Tae-won. He was a strong member of the guild and had a friendly relationship with Kim Yong-woo. I didn't have a bad impression of him after the advice he gave me. Simple. The scale of this party was extraordinary. The chairman of the huge Ilsung group was holding it. The chairman had trembled in front of me. Of course, I didn't remember him. Yoon Hai and Kim Yong-woo had given me the information. But it was small for the richest man in the country. This mansion couldn't even compare to one of the castles that the dukes and grand dukes owned in the demon world. Why don't you take off that mask? It looks tight, Kim Tae-won said to me. He was wearing a casual suit that didn't fit in with the surroundings and looked extremely unhappy to be here. Don't pay attention to it. Damn, this guy is called the strongest awakened. Are you trying to give off a mysterious air? That mysteriousness will disappear if you beat me. Kim Tae-won shook his head. I know myself well, and you are certainly strong. Like you came from an entirely different world. I am flattered that you would say that to my face. But that is only right now. Don't think that you will stay in that spot forever. I just laughed. The gap was indisputable. He knew that he currently wasn't my opponent. However, he still didn't give up. Laying down a challenge. Soon we arrived near the building where the party was being held. Singing and laughing could be heard. Captain Nim, how about it? Am I okay? Yoon Hai was fussing with her clothes. She wore a red dress with cleavage and she looked beautiful. Not bad. My makeup? It isn't smeared? I don't know. Good. I didn't know anything about makeup. Then Yoon Hai plastered a lofty expression on her face. She had transformed into an untouchable persona after making a fuss. Have a great time. Keek. The party ushers opened the door. At the same time, hundreds of eyes turned towards us. There were some familiar faces. The guild masters of the 5 guilds. Among them was a face that I knew. Alan, the woman who led the Dambi guild. In my previous life, she had suffered serious burns from the creatures in my dungeon and kept chasing after me to her death. 2 years ago, she also failed to scout me. Alinli was wearing a white dress and came up to me first. Nice to see you. It has been a while. Kim Yong-woo quickly shook her hand and said, haha, how are you? I shouldn't lie. This year is there was a lot of work. The emergence of the angels. The gathering of creatures. The monster wave. Every day was hectic. Countless awakened died and the guilds suffered a considerable blow. But the Dambi guild seemed to have fared well. I was lucky. By the way, shouldn't you introduce the people behind you? She peeked at me slyly. Alan's gaze was complicated. Was it regret for missing the fish? A mixture of annoyance and self-deprecation. In many ways, she was filled with both love and hatred. I was too short-sighted. Kim Yong-woo turned to introduce me. Ahem. Can you give me some time? A bald man wearing sunglasses approached. He caught my eyes and laughed. I won't fall again today. The bald man spoke in a friendly manner. I frowned slightly. Who? Oh, you don't seem to remember. I thought I gave a strong impression. It was 2 years ago, but I didn't forget. I went to scout you 2 years ago. I am Park Min-woo, leader of the Ararang Guild. Ararang Guild. It was also one of the 5 guilds. No matter how I looked, I couldn't remember him. Then another person jumped in. Omo. Why are you talking among yourselves? Wavy, long hair and glamorous lips. Park Min-woo sighed as the woman in her mid-30s approached. Miss Kim, I came here first. Don't you know the order? There is an order to greet someone? Why shouldn't there be an order when doing greetings? I don't care. The woman pushed aside Park Min-woo and smiled at me. Ho ho, you are the leader of the raid group Devil Hunters? I am the master of the Sorigo Guild, Kim Suk-soo. I sent you a letter 2 years ago, do you remember? Sorigo was also one of the 5 guilds. I don't remember, but I still had no clue. I searched through my memories but there wasn't anything. Pink envelope, lipstick mark, love. Nothing comes to mind? If there was such a thing then it is gone. Was I too intense? Kim Suk-soo moaned and slipped into the background as Kim Yong-woo exclaimed. No, what are you guys doing? Park Min-woo spoke like it was deplorable. I'm sorry but please be a little understanding. Devil Hunters is the #1 raid group in South Korea and everyone wants to meet the strongest awakened. Don't you know how rarely he is seen? Don't you have any dignity? The guild masters of the 5 guilds should maintain an order. Miss Kim, did you hear? The guild master of Heaven's Will is telling us that there is an order. Kim Yong-woo's face was flushed. Somehow his expression seemed like he was used to this. Jangarang. Then the sound of a dish breaking could be heard in the middle of the party. Che, today's food tastes bad. Naturally all eyes were directed towards a young man who was complaining furiously. Other young people were gathered around him. However, everyone looked nervous. He broke it. Ahiu tilde, Yoon Hai clicked her tongue. She wasn't interested in the youth, but the mood was now tense. What is going on? Listen for a while. Yoon Hai slightly lowered her posture and talked stealthily. That young man brimming with ambition is the only child of Chairman Nim. Half a year ago, he became an awakened and used his money as a seed to start a guild. Seed? Well, it was for his own self-interest. He wanted to cause an uproar like the 5 guilds, but failed. Even today, he didn't receive an invitation. He is just trying to get attention, don't give it to him. He will just give you a headache. Okay? You absolutely can't, Yoon Hai emphasized. But I didn't understand things like this. The cool atmosphere quickly disappeared. The guests held hands with each other, danced or had conversations while sipping glasses of wine. However, my face was still stiff. Human parties are quite different from what I know. That's right, I felt goosebumps. I now knew the definition of party. I had no idea it would have such a friendly atmosphere. Basically, I had never participated in a party as a human. I didn't know, so I had let Yoon Hai lead me. I intended to follow the basic rules. But the party only involved dancing and chatting, so I was disappointed. I was born on the battlefield in the demon world. Despite being a dreary place, even the low-level demons lived well. In particular, the party held once a year was enough to be called the salvation of their lives. Captain Nim, where are you going? Yoon Hai's eyes widened. She had wondered about my mood while the guild masters were trying to talk to me. But now I was walking forward towards the young man. South Korea's leading corporation, Ilsung Group. The chairman Sung Hee-jang was arrogant and only did as he pleased. His behavior seemed like there was nothing to fear in this world. The only ones in his eyes were the guild masters of the 5 guilds. He just enjoyed everything in the vicinity. I hated people like this. The original Earl Briggseel that I killed in the demon world had a similar nature. He was someone who believed in good blood. I couldn't stand people like that. He would ridicule his enemies whenever there was a fight. Yesterday I hunted the orcs alone. They were noisy and kept saying chwik chwik. I cut their throats and everything became quiet. Gyu Taek, did you really hunt orcs alone? They look scary, it would be difficult to catch them. Wa tilde, Sung Gyu Taek, that seemed to be the young man's name. He was busy telling stories to the women surrounding him. Those guys aren't my opponent. I managed to reach the 5th floor. Understood? The 5th floor. Yes. I've heard that harpies and mud golems are found there. The Devil Hunters raid group also struggled. Gyu Taek, be reasonable. What, you don't think I can catch creatures like that? Are you ignoring me now? If Devil Hunters succeeded, then I can as well. They are just lucky to become famous, but the awakened in my guild are much stronger. His inferiority complex exploded. In his words, Devil Hunters were lucky to become famous. The woman, who was sweating, opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. The attention on Sung Gyu Taek didn't last long. All eyes were on me. Both men and women. And all the women around Sung Gyu Taek showed an expression of oops. All of them were well aware of the members of Devil Hunters. Even so, Sung Gyu Taek's back was to me as he kept on talking. There was no reason for me to tolerate it. Sung Gyu Taek turned his gaze towards me now that I came closer. He didn't seem to like me and spoke with a frown. What? Cough. Bam. But I didn't give him a chance. There was a short and concise sound as all eyes around me widened. The chairman's pampered son was lying on the floor with a bleeding nose. This party was in the house of Chairman Sung, so the aftermath wouldn't be small. Why? Filled their heads, but they couldn't readily ask the question. Why, you dog bastard? Sung Gyu Taek wiped his nose with the back of his hand and stood up. His face turned red and his right hand quickly clutched a sword. How funny. A mocking smile was on my face. As far as I knew, a party. It was a place to compete with each other in skills. One day every year. It was a day when everyone was equal in battle. I could request duels with superiors in an attempt to kill them. If a duel was refused, then they would be attacked by all the demons around them. There were bad humans, so I expected a similar scene here, only to end up disappointed. There was a small break, but now it was time to have a bit of fun. What, is this funny? Sung Gyu Taek stood up with anger in his eyes. He couldn't accept such treatment. He aimed his sword at me. However, it didn't connect with anything. PPAK, EHEH, the blink of an eye. Sung Gyu Taek lost his center and collapsed. But he couldn't understand why he collapsed. He only realized I hit him in the back after feeling the intense pain. How? Sung Gyu Taek questioned how I got behind him before falling unconscious. Keng. People hovered around Sung Gyu Taek. Sung Gyu Taek's guild members quickly pulled out their swords from the scabbard. We won't excuse any more acts of violence. Acts of violence? If you can't forgive it, then try and stop me. I smiled, revealing my teeth. They weren't even worth considering. There were very few strong awakened among them. It was the same for Sung Gyu Taek. Tension started spreading. Many people were aiming their swords at me. Even the captain of Devil Hunters can't deal with so many people. No, I pushed against the ground. My sword sliced through all the awakened rabble. There were dozens of them. Using only a little bit of power was sufficient. I would create a fun party atmosphere. After a while, those remaining at the party couldn't help freaking out at the scene. Dozens of awakened were kneeling. In less than 5 minutes. In addition, I still didn't look tired. Those who saw me moving for the first time had their mouths gaping open. Stop. A large number of bodyguards appeared at the entrance in order to stop the situation. And there was a bald man with a big belly in front of them. His body trembled as he saw his son and the awakened collapsed on the ground. He urgently sent a bodyguard to check his son was still alive as anger filled his face. Who dares cause a riot like this? But he didn't take action immediately. A wise decision. Randolph, I am the captain of the raid group Devil Hunters. Talk. Kim Yong-woo slapped his forehead in the distance. The chairman formed tight fists. Your name is comparable to a celebrity these days. However, you can't act freely just because of your name. If you don't explain things properly, then you might not leave here alive. The bodyguards drew their guns from the holsters. Guns were originally illegal, but this was a different world. Now it was common for people to be in possession of a firearm. Much less Chairman Sung, who always had bodyguards with him. However, none of them would be able to hurt me. I don't like this party. What? I'm not laughing. Chiok. I took one step closer. The atmosphere became even more tense. South Korea and the world is entering the path of destruction. A large disaster that can't be compared to simple orcs will be coming soon. Yet all of you are in a luxurious mansion and only care about singing, dancing and drinking. No one even pointed out this issue. It is a deplorable charade. I clicked my tongue. My interview with the reporter had spread across the country. I also said that a monster wave would soon happen. Chairman Sung and the people here must have heard it. But people were playing around in this place. They should be busy planning operations and keeping an eye on the dungeon. This meeting was just a shell. It was absolutely useless. You don't know? Or are you pretending not to know? South Korea's power has reached a cliff. Angels appeared, creatures gathered, and there will be a monster wave in a few months. The number of awakened lost in Saudi Arabia also can't be ignored. Things will worsen over the next few months. How many safe days do you think you will have once a monster wave happens? It was apparent that many humans would die. This was a time for the officials to be tightening their belts and conserving their power. Everyone was silent. Those familiar with the situation had a gloomy expression on their faces. It was the same for the guild masters. I took one more step. There is already an insufficient amount of preparation time. There is no time to waste celebrating in a place like this. I saw signs that a monster wave is going to happen with my own eyes. The only way to stop it is to jump into the fire. I wanted people to be resolute and willing to participate, but it is disappointing. Kyao, lightning god, cried out. Everyone was overwhelmed by its shape. Many of them were surprised. Lightning dragon. The dragon had appeared when the angels were fighting the creatures. They never imagined that it would emerge here. One last step and I stood in front of Chairman Sung. Get out of the way. I have no intention of being complacent. At that time, Yi poked the flesh. Hee. Are you hiding something from Yi? Thanks to becoming an origin fairy, Yi could now reliably see through things. And she realized that the flesh had something hidden. Tell me, Yi won't hurt you, Tilda. Kyoke, Kyoke. The flesh continued to flinch back as he was poked. But he didn't bring out the hidden item. Bah, I'll say this. Do you really want to continue keeping it from Yi? Yi pledged to tear the flesh apart as she went back to the Tree of Origin. She intended to seek the opinion of the dungeon master, but he was long gone. Therefore she got a sharp root from the Tree of Origin. I'll say this right now. Yi, this will hurt a little bit. Kakamdal. The flesh instinctively perceived the threat to his life and moved quickly. But it wasn't enough. Flesh, you should have brought it out. This isn't Yi's fault. Yi was grasping a sharp root. She intended to split apart the flesh to find the hidden item. Puik. Yi gave a cruel smile and pierced the heart of the flesh with the root. But she couldn't separate the flesh. A bright light poured out from the area where the root pierced the flesh. Walk. Chapter 112-113, Infinity Armor. What is this? The light immediately disappeared. Yi was scared but hurriedly regained her stability. She grumpily kicked the nasty flesh, only to hurt her toes. She frowned as she rolled and examined the flesh from every direction. It only took a little bit to realize that his form had changed. He absorbed the root. The sharp and solid root. The light was from the flesh absorbing it, and now the changes were obvious. The flesh had used it as a source of magic power. Flesh, are you angry with Yi? Yi's conscience was pricked and she released the flesh. Before there was wonderful elasticity as she poked it, but now it was extremely hard. The rigid body was like he was angry. It didn't work. This Tilda, it isn't fun. Duck. Yi kicked the rigid flesh. Yeah, obviously she got a sore foot. Yi rolled around on the ground. Despite doing the same thing just seconds before, Yi hadn't learned. Hying, I'm not playing with you. Yi cried out and flew off to harass the bees. Stein, the elder of the dwarves assigned to the 7th floor of the dungeon. He was now heading towards the 15th floor with some sturdy dwarves. Elder Stein Nim, will we get some good roots this time? Get rid of the anxiety in your voice. We aren't going to beg. But we aren't dark elves. Frankly, I feel a little uncomfortable facing them. Bah, we just have to ignore them since Dungeon Master commanded us to get the roots. And the Tree of Origin didn't grow here due to chance. It is all thanks to the greatness of Dungeon Master. Stein had an upright character. The dwarves and elves were enemies. Their mood darkened every time they met. However, the roots from the Tree of Origin were a very good material. The dwarves could quickly improve their skills making decent armor, and they could boost their reliability with the dungeon master. It was important to obtain the roots of origin, but they always needed to negotiate with the dark elves for the roots. It was ludicrous and absurd. They wouldn't even be able to see them if it wasn't for Dungeon Master. Stein laughed and then snorted. We are productive dwarves. On the other hand, they just grow a few plants. We can do at least that much. In many ways, we can be considered proxies of the Dungeon Master. They'll see soon. Right now the woman called Chrysley is handling the roots, but that will soon change. Once the Dwarf King is born, we will be in the top position in the dungeon. That's right, I will be waiting eagerly for that day, a sturdy young dwarf replied. The thought of having the authority of a dungeon master caused them to be thrilled. After walking through the forest for a while, Stein frowned. By the way, no one came to greet us, such lazy bastards. Isn't that their original nature? Tisk tisk. This is why the dark elves, Stein was spitting when he suddenly cocked his head. There was something sparking in the bushes. The dwarf poked it with a foot and revealed what it was. This, a metal sheet. Stein touched it, patted it, brought the metal plate to his ear and other actions. Elder Nim, what is it? A material I've never seen before. I can't feel any magic power from it. I'll have to hammer at it. The eyes of the young dwarf shone. Will Elder Nim work on the metal? Of course. Rather, there is a lot I don't know about it. Stein didn't have the inherent knowledge of all metals that the Dwarf King was born with. He had no choice but to study. But it was so interesting. It is unusual, like something that has just been born into this world. In his hand was the newly born, unidentified metal. Just imaging the results caused his heart to be excited. Kong, Kong. Stein sat in front of a hearth and hammered it. It had already been 40 hours, during which he repeated the same action without any food or drinks. A great metal. I never thought there would be a metal like this in the world. Stein had accidentally picked up a metal he had never seen before. An unexplained metal that seemed to come from myth or legends. Every time it is broken, it just returns to its original position. Its ability to maintain its original properties is very strong. The second thing was its solid nature. So changing the form itself was very difficult. I will make an armor. An armor that the world has never seen. He didn't know why he wanted to make armor. It just seemed like he had to make armor. He felt like that. Kong. Stein poured all his skills into it. He never looked away and spent dozens of hours without sleep. A hammer was constantly beating down on an anvil in the hottest world. He did not stop. His muscular body slowly shrank. It was like his life was literally being carved away. A superhuman mentality and obsession. But little by little, the metal was being shaped. His eyes were kept open by excitement. 3 days, 4 days, a week. The dwarves were worried, but Stein banned them from entering his workshop. Once this was completed, it would be his masterpiece. He didn't want to be disturbed. After approximately 10 days, the form of the armor started to gradually take shape. Stein's body and spirit gradually eroded as the work progressed. Saliva dripped. His eyes were full of blood. His white hair and beard were growing. His hands didn't stop moving. Stein willingly became a slave to the metal. He kept working the metal. The long march finally ended after a month. This thing is mine. It can't be given to anyone else. Greed filled his eyes as he grabbed the armor. The party ended due to the storm I caused. Kim Yong-woo's hands and mouth were always busy moving. Time passed quickly and my daily business didn't change much. Of course, there wasn't anything specific. I primarily trained Yoon-hai and Edward. Krasla mainly trained Edward, while I made sure Yoon-hai could handle the property of lightning. The way you use it with the sword is still a little stiff. Right? I'm not used to it even when I repeat the movements over and over. I'll teach you a way. Do I need to take off my clothes? There is no need. Really? Yoon-hai smiled like a cat. Unlike in the past, there was no need for direct skin contact to induce growth. I placed my hand on Yoon-hai's abdomen and sent a strong electric current. Yoon-hai's body twisted but she endured it. The current flowing was strongly stimulating her erogenous zones. Other people would be turned inside out, but Yoon-hai had received the blessing of the lightning spirit. The electric current naturally moved inside Yoon-hai. I then slowly moved her hand holding the sword. Moving the energy of others was very delicate work. Intense concentration was needed. Master, something big has happened. A dwarf has gone crazy. My concentration broke. The wild current made Yoon Hai leap. Fortunately, nothing dangerous happened. Why did you do that? Wait a minute. I stood up. At the same time, I contacted Yihi. Yihi, what is going on? Yihi isn't sure. The dwarf elder is wearing flesh. He isn't listening to Yihi, he is just trying to absorb the tree of origin. The griffin collapsed and Gigantes is blocking him, but he can't hold out forever. Stein, wearing flesh? He turned flesh into an armor. What should I do? Yihi is afraid. Master. Flesh could only refer to infinite flesh. But didn't infinite flesh die at Pacangrioli's dungeon? He had somehow returned alive and was now disguised as armor. Yihi's voice was extremely pitiful. It was to the extent that I could almost see Yihi trembling. The griffin collapsed. I pressed a hand against my forehead. The griffin was a high-class creature. Despite it being in the lowest tier, it still took a lot for it to collapse. In addition, even Gigantes was struggling. The griffin and Gigantes were the strongest creatures I had. Krasla, Chrisley and White were strong, but they couldn't compare. Hold on, I am coming now. I realized the seriousness of the situation and immediately moved. Stein, no, Greed, was hungry. He was thirsty. His greed had been awakened. Absorbing that thing seemed to make his hunger decrease a little bit. Greed moved forward like a thirsty person seeking a well. However, it wasn't that easy. There were too many blocking him. You can't pass. A large bird and a giant. Greed didn't like them. He didn't understand why they were blocking him, but he had to get past them. The battle with the giant was fierce. The big bird was tricky because it had a strong offense. The armor suffered many blows that broke it. However, it was able to quickly regain its original shape. It was an infinite power. This was the true reality of greed. Gigantes was powerful, but that was all. Greed couldn't be beaten with simple power. Quarurung. There was a violent collision. Gigantes was surprisingly pushed back. Cough. Blood flowed from Gigantes' mouth. The eyes of everyone watching the battle were shocked. The dark elves and dwarves gathered and were prepared to attack. They couldn't allow him to pierce through. Chrisley, who was in the center, raised her wand. There was the Lich, Spartwa and White, but they wouldn't be able to win against such a tireless existence. They were filled with tension with every step Greed took. Soon Greed was only a short distance away. How funny. This is very interesting. The true master of the dungeon revealed himself. It had been alarming. Something unintended had occurred inside my dungeon. It was very unpleasant and I needed to resolve it promptly. I moved to the 15th floor using the magic circle, and there were fallen creatures everywhere. It was like a typhoon had blown past. Someone had exerted an overwhelming force in the surrounding environment. And I curiously examined the griffin that was lying on the ground. Fortunately, it was still alive, but I could determine the combat capabilities of the opponent through the injuries. It is good that the griffin has high health. It was a high-class creature. It was shallow, but the griffin was definitely still breathing. I urgently poured a potion on the griffin's injuries. It should be able to hold on for half a day. I needed to resolve this situation first. Infinite flesh. Stein. What happened? Questions were still running through my head. It was surprising that Infinite Flesh was still alive and was raising trouble while attached to Stein. I didn't know the reason. The only way was to verify it directly. Soon the dungeon started shaking. I heard a crashing sound at the same time. A battle was happening right in front of me. I walked quickly and was able to witness the scene of Gigantes collapsing while vomiting blood. Gigantes, who was confident in a one-to-one fight, was completely defeated. I swallowed my saliva. At that moment, the dwarf Stein walked forward wearing a black armor. The armor was very unusual. It was carved with the image of a snake with a wide open mouth like it was roaring. Dark magic power was emanating from it and completely eating Stein's mind. I immediately knew the cause after using Mind's Eye. Name: Infinity Armor, Running Wild. Description: an armor filled with endless greed. The source is a branch from the Tree of Origin, but the blacksmith was lacking skills and couldn't properly purify it. In order to prevent it from running wild, dismantling is necessary. Asterisk shape recovery. Attacks can be absorbed and converted to magic power. The impact of certain blows are invalidated. Asterisk 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 it is associated with the 7 sins, greed, and can replace it in the set. I couldn't help smiling. I didn't know how it was made, but the options were really great. It ignored some strikes and could absorb attacks to convert them into magic power. It meant that key skills could be used infinitely. It would be one of the best items in a long war. Moreover, it could replace one of the 7 sins. Infinity armor combined with wrath and sloth would give him 3 pieces in the set. How funny. This is very interesting. The human party couldn't even compare. This was something that truly amused me. The damage caused wasn't within my plans, but it might be a big benefit. Only walking on a fixed path would cause a lack of stimulation. Things were likely to become stagnant or too easy. I didn't want that. Stein turned around and looked at me. His eyes were stained red. Chrisley and Yeehee were nervously watching from the rear with the creatures. My smile wasn't erased as I said, "There seems to be a stir in my dungeon. The time has come for punishment. Don't stop me, Pack." Stein pushed off against the ground in order to move faster. A movement that would never be seen from a dwarf. I didn't panic and just pulled out Wrath. Quang. The opponent was using a thick sword to carry out random attacks. Finesse was missing, he just swung. But it was powerful. A wrong hit wouldn't be good for me. Despite that, I was still smiling. The armor managed to pull such power out of Stein. I couldn't help getting excited. How could I not have fun? Let's see if it can recover the shape again after Dark Sword. Injuries made with Dark Sword couldn't be healed, so I was curious to see if the armor could repair itself. Wrath was surrounded by darkness. Titong. The armor was hard. My sword bounced off it. I laughed and took a step back while maintaining my stance. Stein entered the empty space in front of me. He was just blindly attacking. It might have worked on Gigantes, but that wasn't enough for me. I had sharpened my skills in the demon world in my previous life. Suik. Stein's left arm was cut, and black smoke wrapped around the wound in the armor. The left arm started to gradually heal. No, it wasn't. I quickly modified my thoughts. It isn't healing, haha. Creation. I realized it. He wasn't recovering. The arm was being reconstructed. It wasn't healing, so the effect of Dark Sword wouldn't work. I felt a lot of emotions. Recovery and creation were completely different areas. Even if this was explained in the achievements store, I honestly wouldn't have believed it. The fact that the armor could recreate itself was a surprising blow. However, a huge amount of magic power will be needed for creation. I am curious about how long it can last. I had a curious nature. I wondered about what it could stop, how much it could absorb in the recovery. Paranormal. One of the 5 blessings of paranormal, magic power plus 5 for 30 minutes has been applied. Perhaps it was my higher intelligence? Unlike before, I received good blessings more often. Wrath, high magic power, 101, has caused strength, agility and stamina to rise by 10. Intelligence has fallen by 20, but your original pure intelligence is more than 76. Due to the unique characteristics caused by astral code, you won't be taken over by the wrath state. My strength jumped over 100. 105 was a transcendent number. My intelligence reached 91, so it finally seemed possible to use sloth. But there was no need to use it now. Wrath was enough. I was trying to dismantle the armor. I smiled towards Stein's restored left arm and said, "Do not disappoint me." Quang, quang, quarurung. Wrath slashed the armor. Cracks were caused in it with every hit. Stein's expression changed. His body was gradually moving away from me. Greed started to feel fear and was trying to run away. "You are an excellent blacksmith. I won't kill you." First. In fact, Stein was an influential person among the dwarves. It would be a shame to kill him. Hopefully he would be able to produce more things like infinity armor, without the problems. First, I needed to remove the armor from him. Then I would fix his improper manners. Too slow. Thanks to the wrath skill, agility had also reached over 100. No matter how fast he was, Stein wouldn't be able to escape from me. Kua. Stein eventually gave up on running and aimed his sword at me again. Once again, moves with no finesse wouldn't work against me. I raised wrath with a laugh. I gathered all my strength. Would it be able to absorb this attack? I hit the armor as hard as I could. Quang. Stein collapsed. The armor was partly destroyed. I forced the armor off. It will recover little by little. However, the running wild status had disappeared. I once again checked the armor with mind's eye. Name, Infinity Armor, Growth. Description: an armor filled with endless greed. The source is a branch from the tree of origin, but the blacksmith was lacking skills and couldn't properly purify it. It has been dismantled, but the magic power of the user allows the infinity armor to grow. Asterisk shape recovery. Attacks can be absorbed and converted to magic power. The impact of certain blows are invalidated. Asterisk special options will develop depending on the degree of growth. Asterisk 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 it is associated with the 7 sins, greed, and can replace it in the set. Growth? This was the first time I had seen that. It is due to Infinite Flesh's skills. I was convinced. Infinity Armor had been made using the flesh. I had high expectations for the skills that would be revealed as it grew. Treat Stein and clean him up. In addition, tend to the griffin as soon as possible. I understand, my dungeon master. Chrisley replied respectfully. I held the armor and headed to the top floor. Great. The shape of the armor completely recovered in 2 days. A third set item. Collecting more set items would have better effects. Obtaining 2 set items didn't have much of an effect. But this was the third one. I wore the infinity armor and a message window instantly popped up. Wrath, Sloth, and Greed, 3 of the 7 sins have been collected. The relevant skills have disappeared and the new skill, Corruption, X Epic, has been created. Corruption? I repeated it a few times and looked closely at the message window. An exceptional epic rated skill? My heart jumped quickly. I swallowed my saliva and opened the status window. Name: Randolph Brigzeal. Occupation: Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title: * Dungeon Hunter. Residual stats +1 when occupying dungeons and hunting demons. * Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. * first to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. * Origin Master. Epic. All stats +3. Stats: Strength 80, +15, Intelligence 86, +5. Agility 75, +15, Stamina 80, +5. Magic power 85, +11. Potential: 406 +51 500ths. Remaining stat points: 7. Electric power: 21 gigawatts. Uniqueness: Heart of the Hell Monarch has woken up. Skill: Combine Everything, U, Mind's Eye, XU, Dark Sword, XU, Divine Sword Unity, XU, Passive, Lightning Elemental, Epic, Corruption, X Epic. Before and after comparison: Strength 91, Intelligence 76, Agility 86, Stamina 84, Magic 95, Potential 392 +45 hundredths. Strength 95, Intelligence 91, Agility 90, Stamina 85, Magic 96, Potential 406 +51 500ths. The last time I checked my status window had been after the angel eggs. My stats had increased by a lot. Among them, intelligence rose significantly due to the Emperor's Sword and the Tree of Origin. However, my eyes naturally went to the skills. Wrath and Sloth were gone and Corruption took their place. I gazed at the description of Corruption. Name: Corruption, X Epic. Description: You don't know what true corruption is. *****, be cautious. A short explanation that wasn't satisfactory at all. However, it gave off a striking feeling. In the end, the best way to determine the effects of corruption was to use the skill directly. It isn't possible right now. When I was taken over by Wrath, I was caught in a completely destructive state. This skill was half a grade higher, so it was likely that I wouldn't have any self-control. It was only half a step, but it was like the difference between the sky and earth. It wasn't easy to use it when the effect was unknown. Mind's Eye couldn't see the secret options. There was just a warning telling me to be careful. I liked adventures and challenges, but there was a clear limit. I can't use it at the moment. I nodded. I shifted my attention from the armor to Yihi. Over the last 2 days, I had been too busy watching the infinity armor to question her. Yihi trembled as my gaze fell on her. Chapter 114 to 119. Demon World Auction. Why Yihi? Why are you looking at me all of a sudden? I feel hot. Yi waved her hand and feigned ignorance. But her rigid facial expression was different from her gestures. Tell me calmly, that, Yi, was wrong, Hyang? Yi flew and fell on both knees before me. I would see through any excuses that she made. Yi, who was silent, finally spoke. That white guy, he brought the flesh, so wasn't Yi in charge? But he suddenly made me furious. Yi didn't mean to do it. That white guy was white. I heard the story in silence. Yi constantly moved her hand around as she explained. She had grabbed a piece of the tree of origin and stabbed it into the flesh. And Stein seemed to have picked the hardened flesh up afterwards. In other words, Stein accidentally picked up infinite flesh and turned him into the infinity armor. Yi was really wrong. Yi should have been careful until the end. Please forgive me, Master, Hyang. She was much more sincere about apologizing than before. I just continued looking at Yi. I often found it amazing how different her perspective was. She had a careless nature. As well as being rough and playful, she was obsessive and faithful. So Yi was very different from me. Creative, the power to produce something new. I instinctively recognized her capabilities. No one else would have tried to stab the flesh with a branch of the tree of origin. Those who knew the true nature of the flesh would be afraid to even approach. Or maybe they would consider a normal procedure. She also buried the angels near the tree of origin. I would have thrown the corpses away or fed them to the creatures. But thanks to Yi burying them properly, a lot of Tashmal's wariness had faded away. In addition, there were a few trivial things in her head. She has been helpful without knowing it. It could be a coincidence. However, it happened too many times to be dismissed as a coincidence. Obviously, Yi had sinned, but I didn't know if scolding her was the right thing to do. If constraints were placed, then her creative behavior was likely to disappear. Of course, Yi wasn't worried about this. Tell me your sins yourself. First I would give her an option. Yi thought for a while before saying. I didn't wait for Master. No, that isn't a sin, I gave you that type of permission. Yi left the flesh alone. It is a dangerous existence that can't be left alone. That is one sin, but the greater sin still remains. A great sin. What was it? Yi's expression was busy thinking. Then Yi seemed to realize something and said, Hyang, I contacted Master late. I nodded. That's right, you should have contacted me as soon as it happened. It is dangerous when I am far away. Now I see. Yi was really bad, Yi sullenly said with tears in her eyes. If this case, your error was not contacting me quickly enough. You failed to do that, so I will punish you. However, you will set the level of punishment. Yi will? Yes. Punishment and education at the same time. This was to find Yi's creativity. She would also acknowledge the mistake and not do it again. I waited as Yi contemplated for a while. After 10 minutes, Yi finally came to a decision and opened her eyes. I will be a bee for a month. A daughter of honey. I will have fun with the bees. Yi will now go to the bees. Was this a joke? No, it isn't. It wasn't a joke. A red face. Trembling bodies. Her presence itself seemed to harass the bees. I thought about handling her similar to the method with the dark elves in the past. Her idea was creative, but it wasn't really what I was thinking. 1 month is too long. The dungeon can't be left alone during that time. Yi's punishment can't be shorter. How about you spend the rest of the time helping Tashmal with the baby angels? The leaves of the tree of origin were a great help in growing the wings of the angels. I wondered what the effect would be if an origin fairy looked after the baby angels. I understand, Master. Leave it to Yi. Then go imitate the bees. Ah, that's right. Yi is now a bee. Ween tilde. Yi flapped her wings very hard, trying her best to imitate the way a bee flew. She soon headed to the location of the bees. I was at a loss for words. I would check on her in a week. There were too many things happening. Taking over the dungeon in China, the attack of the angels, and the emergence of the cruel commander. After 3 months, a note was sent through a dimensional crack. The caller was Dubalong. It is the list of items for the Demon World auction. It had finally arrived. I smiled as I read the list. This year will be the turning point. The contents of the note were great. I checked it a few times and knew what many of the items were. The time would soon come to obtain the goods. I thought of the treasures that I would later obtain. I would use this auction to get even further ahead, so it was turning point. Once left behind here, the other demons wouldn't be able to catch up for the next 5 years. In contrast, I would gain a myriad of benefits in the next 5 years. Dubalong gave me the list due to our alliance. Haha, I laughed as I checked the number of points I had. The Demon World Auction. The points I had last year couldn't even compare. This was important. It was to the extent that I wouldn't run out of points no matter how many things I bought. The winner would be me. At the same time, I would be painting a loser sign on the heads of the other demons. I couldn't stop laughing as I imagined the look on Upa's face. Wouldn't it be an emergency situation for him? He won't be able to stop me. Anyway, it was a fact that I would be the winner. Even if he tried something, I will greet him with a smile. He would be used as a stimulus on the path ahead of me. The crack was opened. The familiar gnome-shaped dark spirit welcomed me. It has been a while. Kihihi, how are you? It has been a decent year. What about the spirit world? It has been very busy. We've been trying to filter out the spies. I knew about this problem, but I didn't know about what occurred afterwards. I didn't want people to know about my relationship with Dubalong, so I acted like I had just heard the story. I asked with mock curiosity. There are spies here? Kihihi. It is ridiculous. The other elemental spirits disguised themselves as dark spirits to hassle us. Thanks to that, this auction will be very quiet. By the way, how many points have you gathered? Aren't you prohibited from directly asking? The dark spirit just laughed. Agu, I'm sorry. Please turn a deaf ear to it. It's just that the average number of points in the 3rd year is very high. Isn't Randolph Nim our best customer? You will be a great help in increasing the average. How much? Don't be alarmed. 1.3 million. 1.3 million. I nodded lightly. The demons were catching up. There were 69 demons for a total of 89.7 million points. And I had a 22 million share of that total. In other words, it meant that the actual average was 1 million. I alone had raised the average by 300,000. In my previous life, that would be enough to buy 2 high-class 2LV creatures. Of course, there would be a severe competition over the auction goods. In some cases, it would be used as the starting point for a war. So it was important to obtain high-class creatures. High-class creatures showed off the power of the dungeon. They were hidden cards that could absolutely reverse the situation. The factions of the Grand Dukes were eager to buy top-quality creatures. There would be creatures such as a Hydra, Dragon, etc. High-class 2LV creatures. And there would be those at the same level or higher than the Griffin and Gigantes in this auction. I had clearly seen it with my own eyes. It was like Dubalong said last time. High-class 2LV creatures were now being bought in the 3rd year. It was enough to shake the balance. I must buy them. I needed to buy the treasures, no matter how many points I had to spend. The dark spirit examined my expression and said, "You don't seem greatly surprised." I am surprised. Kihi, your ability to manage your expression is very great. Don't talk nonsense. We should start moving. I will guide you. Follow me. This was the location where the auction items could be previewed. There was only Ariel in the 1st year, then quite a few demons in the 2nd year, but now all the demons were examining the goods inside. There were some familiar faces. Grand Duke Okulos and his demons. Grand Duke Upa. There were quite a few empty positions next to him. There were exactly 68 demons if I counted. Including me, there were 69. The number of demons remained unchanged except for the ones I killed. There were no big surprises so far. But they weren't interested in me. The sound of footsteps was heard but they didn't turn their heads once. The huge cage in the middle of the room was drawing all the attention of the demons. Ho, I think this creature was exterminated so I don't know where they found it. On the subject of this creature, something is strange. I also felt a similar sentiment. It was admiration. I moved my gaze and looked at the creature inside the cage. She is from the Celestial Maiden clan. Mago, a species that mixed with the wind and manipulated storms. That was Mago. At first glance, she had the form of a woman, but wasn't as beautiful as they were known to be. She was 5 meters in height and had hair that was dozens of centimeters long. She only had one eye and her breasts were flabby, but her speed and power were enough to startle the heavens and earth. And Mago had insightful eyes. In my previous life, Okulos has called her his gem of destruction. Their population was very low so it wasn't easy to obtain them. But one of them could leave senseless devastation and thousands of corpses in their wake. It is good to see her. It was sincerely great. I smiled as I gazed into Mago's one eye. After a while, Mago suddenly started to rampage. Heeing, quang, quang. A huge storm moved around Mago. However, the cage was made of a special device and didn't move an inch. Ha! Great magic power! Kiok! Mago screamed. Then she shed red tears and collapsed. This stage shows that the contract isn't complete. This was only the 3rd year. The spirits weren't used to dealing with high-class creatures. It was inevitable. Mago was like a rat caught in a trap. You are mine. All the demons here were thinking that. They swallowed their saliva as they imagined owning Mago. She was a high-class 2LV creature, so they would be able to gain an advantage over the other demons. The demons had been using the time to save their strength. They couldn't let humans disrupt the balance by killing some demons. Upa, he looks impatient. I turned to look at Grand Duke Upa. The positions next to him that should have been full were quite empty. Pagan Grioli was banned, but there should have been 2 more demons. However, they couldn't be seen. It was because I killed them. He didn't know the facts. Thanks to that, Grand Duke Upa's expression could easily be read. An expression that showed he couldn't relax. He showed hostility as he observed the surroundings. There was intense greed in his eyes as he stared at Mago. Upa, don't you look a little shabby? A person with giant goat horns. Perfection didn't exist in this world, but she was a demon with the blood of the devil. Grand Duke Ariel openly laughed. The difference between her faction and Upa's was too large. Upa's expression distorted even further. Shut up, Ariel. You should hide your indignities. Hide my indignities? Upa, I don't like people planning things in secret. Indeed, it is more classy than challenging a guy. Ariel's expression changed. The challenge couldn't be avoided. So tell me that you want to fight. Although you are completely delusional and childish, isn't this the perfect moment to break our relationship? Don't be complacent. Ariel Diablo. The 2 of them growled at each other, revealing their teeth. They had no confidence in fighting each other, so it was just a back and forth. However, what if one of them obtained Mago? It was evident that at least Ariel and Upa would try to obtain Mago. Compared to them, Okulo's and Pandemonium's desire was lacking. In particular, I couldn't understand what Okulo's was thinking. Sick. Okulo's made eye contact with me and smiled. He seemed to be saying, I know. Okulo's was relaxed. He was like this despite tasting a little bit of my power. I need to prepare. At that time, he had said. He had obtained big information in exchange for his arm. I would have to be prepared depending on the direction he went in. Okulo's. Where did you sell one of your arms? Okuyo's smile faded to an expressionless look as he turned around. Tisk tisk, you really lack any friendliness. The Grand Dukes were badmouthing each other. He was Pandemonium. He was critical as he didn't receive an answer to his question. However, Pandemonium didn't stop there. Don't you think so, Randolph Briggseel? I don't know. I tried to suppress my heart from beating wildly. I had little contact with Pandemonium in my previous life. It was the first time he spoke to me, so it meant he accepted me to a certain degree. I had only heard stories about Pandemonium. The demons of the other factions called him very annoying and strange. He is someone who would stab a dagger quietly. I was impressed by Pandemonium and opened mind's eye. Name: Pandemonium. Occupation: Demon Grand Duke, Dungeon Master. Title: Asterisk Spellbreaker, Epic, Magic Power +10. Asterisk Doomsday Prophet, Epic, Intelligence +10. Asterisk Serpent's Tongue, XU, Magic Power +8. Stats: Strength 80, Intelligence 82, +10. Agility 91, Stamina 78. Magic Power 85, +18. Potential: 416 +28 500ths. Uniqueness: a shaman who feeds on the dead. In the end, he developed an aura of death. Skill: Order Destruction, Epic, Unique Ward, Epic, Power of Death, Epic, Amazing Observation, U. Relative Comparison: Pandemonium. Strength 80, Intelligence 92, Agility 91, Stamina 78, Magic 103, Potential: 416 +28 500ths. Randolph Briggseel. Strength 96, Intelligence 93, Agility 91, Stamina 85, Magic 98, Potential: 412 +51 500ths. My total stats were still higher. After gaining the infinity armor, my stats had slowly but steadily grown. Strength increased by 1, agility by 1, intelligence by 2 and magic power by 2. But, what was a Grand Duke? His pure abilities were very high. At that time, Pandemonium narrowed his eyes. This wily bastard, you saw something. I calmly replied. Are you deluded? My eyes aren't wrong. It is because I am a person well versed in spells. Then I suppose you saw correctly. There was no need to quarrel. Especially if the opponent was Pandemonium. I would just become more tired from a lengthy altercation. It didn't matter if he knew that much. A mysterious guy. Tell me honestly, are you the one who touched Upa's faction? It seemed he had wanted to ask me this. At the same time, the magic power in the area changed. His unique ward, epic, skill stretched out. It seemed to purposely block any part of this conversation from leaking. He doesn't want the other demons to hear. Information was power. Pandemonium was well aware of this. I didn't know the results, but it seemed like he had really incredible powers of observation. However, I wasn't kind enough to give him the answer he was seeking. Pandemonium, I thought that was your work. I wasn't being sincere. I wasn't sure that I should poke him. But Pandemonium replied firmly. Upa is lazy by nature, but now he will be working in earnest. Isn't it obvious that he is very annoyed? Indeed, I was quite familiar with Upa. Upa was aware of the seriousness of 3 demons in his faction being killed. Apart from Pakan Grioli, the other demons were mediocre, so there was no need to be concerned. But now it was different. Pakan Grioli was a duke, so it was natural for Upa to feel concerned. He wanted to ferret out the culprit. I answered with a smile. Why is it important to you? Hoo-hoo. Indeed, you are right. But that still doesn't answer my question. The other Grand Dukes might be ignoring you, but apart from Ariel, I think that you are the only one who would touch Upa. They will self-destruct by fighting each other, so why should I move? What can I do alone? The reason is not important. And, aren't you twisting this conversation little by little? I have examined your behavior in the Demon World auction over the last 2 years. Your aim to gain our attention was successful. Thanks, this has been fun, but I have to go now. Unique ward was removed. Nobody seemed to pay any attention as Pandemonium moved away. Is he looking down on me? Pandemonium seemed inwardly convinced that I was the culprit. Of course, he wouldn't pass that information onto Grand Duke Upa. It would be good news for him if Upa continued being damaged. So he seemed to be inciting me. I made a mistake. Perhaps I became too proud because of my memories of my previous life. I thought of them as moving puppets. Out of nowhere, something like this had happened. It won't be easy. The Demon World auction. I was still confident that it would be the beginning of my rise. Nice to see you. The time has come once again for the Demon World auction. I, Dubalong, happily greet you. The spacious hall. The curtains opened and Dubalong appeared in clown makeup. Dubalong bowed his head as his expression seemed to give off innocence. Alas, the numbers have reduced from last year. As a host, my heart is pained whenever a guest disappears. However, we can't stop the auction. Furthermore, this auction has goods that have never been seen before. It isn't an exaggeration to call them delicacies or treasures. Stop chatting. I'm sorry, Grand Duke Upa Nim. Then shall I proceed straight away? Upa was in a hurry. Someone was clearly aiming for him. The gap in power with the other factions was already starting to show. He definitely had to restore the balance somehow. He also wanted to see the progress of other demons through the auction. The quality of the goods in this year's auction was incomparable to last year's. He didn't have sufficient words to express how important it was. He needed to obtain the necessary items. We've had a number of concerns due to your average points rising so rapidly. It couldn't be the same as last year. In particular, we took a lot of time preparing the first item. Now, I will introduce it. An epic grade item. Just wearing it will drastically increase your force. Hyan Moon's necklace. A dark spirit brought out a piece of jewelry as Dubalong proudly introduced it. A necklace with a small miniature of the moon that gave off a fantasy-like atmosphere. Very pure magic power could be clearly felt from it. It came out. I nodded lightly. I was familiar with this item. I definitely needed to buy the necklace. It was originally worn by Ariel Diablo. But, would that happen again? I opened mind's eye. Name, Hyan Moon's necklace, epic. Description. a necklace that belonged to the prophet and sword master High Moon. It is said that his magic power reflects the moon itself and that he also died under the moon. Asterisk magic power will increase by 3 when the moon is out. The secret swords techniques of the collection, Moonlight Falling, Epic, Passive, can be used. Asterisk 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 if magic power is more than 90, the speed of collecting moonlight will accelerate. The High Moon's necklace itself was very beneficial. The option of having magic power grow by 3 under the moonlight wasn't difficult to find. It was possible in the unique grade of items. However, I needed to learn the secret sword technique, Moonlight Falling. The secret technique name attached to it meant that it could exert more power than its rating. Moonlight Falling could be used with dual swords. I obtained the Emperor's sword, so I desperately needed a dual swordsmanship skill. Each demon observed the item with their own skills. Afterwards, they looked at the High Moon's necklace with shiny eyes. Dubalong gave a dark smile and opened his mouth. The auction will start at 1 million points. 1 million. It was high from the very start. It was close to the average number of points. However, the name High Moon made it worth it. High Moon was a sword master. There was almost no information remaining about him, but it was known that he was unparalleled with the sword. 1 million. Oh, I don't have to worry now. Ariel Diablo has called 1 million points. Ariel Diablo's eyes shone. She knew how to handle all weapons. A weapons master. Naturally, she had her eyes on items that could teach her swordsmanship. She had a strong greed and obsession towards learning other techniques. All the demons were aware of it and the challenge she threw out. Challenge, yes, a challenge. She had an easier time wielding weapons. But this was a unique sword technique. If a true weapons master obtained their hands on it, then it would show great destructive power. That's why she tried to acquire numerous skills. It was self-explanatory that her skills would advance one step further if she obtained High Moon's Moonlight Falling. I was certain since I had seen it directly in my previous life. Ariel was excited after learning the value of this item. She opened up her magic power and her goat horns grew longer. 1.1 million. I opened my mouth. At that moment, the atmosphere in the venue became cold. Ariel sent me a frosty glare. However, I didn't care about her. The auction was a place where everyone could equally bid. Backing down from a challenge didn't suit me. If I wanted to obtain the item, then I would. My points last year and the year before couldn't compare to what I had now. I didn't know how many points Ariel Diablo had, but there was clearly a limit. Dubalong gave a big nod and said, 1.1 million points. Randolph Briggseel Nim, you really are a strong man. 1.2 million. Ah, Ariel Nim. As expected, there is a fierce competition. High Moon's necklace was quite valuable. I relaxed and looked around at the dynamics of the demons. The starting price of 1 million. It was still possible for the dukes to participate. They would have obtained a large number of points from the angel invasion. Only Upa's faction was quiet. They needed immediate power. This meant a strong creature. A secret sword technique wasn't in their sights. Upa and his faction seemed to be restraining themselves at the moment. Okulos and Pandemonium were seeking different things. I need a moderate push. A bid that Ariel couldn't touch. It would also be impossible for the other demons. Let's see. 1.5 million. Is the same thing as last year going to happen again? Randolph Nim has bid 1.5 million points. Last year, I had gobbled up most of the good auction items. And I intended to do that this year as well. Ariel looked even more determined. It was inevitable. There was an average of 1.3 million points. I alone had raised it by 300,000. The real average was closer to 1 million. 1.5 million would be burdensome even to a Grand Duke. 1.5 million. Is there really nobody else? Dubalong carefully searched the venue. And, congratulations, High Moon's necklace has been sold to Randolph Nim. You won't regret it. The winning item will be sent. Don't you already know? Shortly after the auction ended, it would be sent to my dungeon through a crack. Dubalong sent me a playful wink. I folded my arms. The following auction item was enough to grab my attention. Let me introduce you to an unusual lich. Usually a lich is reminiscent of death. Oddly enough, this lich cares about life. The lich, Gaparam. There was no need for a cage. The lich wearing a white robe proudly walked in. Despite the freshly rotten skin, His actions weren't awkward at all. But that wasn't the surprising part. I want a demon who will allow me to continue my research. The cost of my research is 3 million points a year. I inevitably went bankrupt and had to form a contract with the dark spirits. I am seeking the help of someone here to continue my research. Do you have to speak? Dubalong shot back. This was a little unusual. No, it surpassed unusual. An auction item trying to appeal on his own? I've heard the name somewhere before. Actually, this had been a mystery since I received Dubalong's note. I had apparently heard the name somewhere but I couldn't remember it. Life research? That is vague. Tell me properly, Upa said. Then Gaparam pulled out a vial that contained the form of a fetus. This is a directly manufactured homunculus. Although it was a failure, there was some degree of performance. My goal is to go beyond magic and biotechnology to create a homunculus more perfect than Delasis. Homunculus. A flawless life. It was unknown if Delasis was a demon, human or fallen angel, but it was still created. It took 1 month to become an adult. It took 3 months to learn everything around it. The problem was that it had an extremely short lifespan and died within 3 years. A complete homunculus meant that the maximum lifespan would increase. However, no one had been able to solve that problem yet. Impractical, Grand Duke Pandemonium said. He was one of the demons who had worked closely with this project. Therefore, he was skeptical about the completion of a perfect homunculus. Gaparam frowned as he asked, "Why do you think it is impractical? Magic has no bounds. There is no reason I can't step through the door to create a homunculus." "How many years have you poured into this?" Pandemonium asked Gaparam, who replied with a rotten smile. "This will be my 360th year. 740 years. More than double that number. That is the number of years I studied the homunculus." That reminded me, Pandemonium was the oldest among the Grand Dukes. I had the impression that he existed since the time when there was no devil, so I couldn't easily predict his age. "Are you saying that it is impossible for me?" "Don't make me laugh. It is just impossible. Do you want me to explain it simply? 1 + 1 = 2. Trying to make it equal 3 is out of the question. It is the same for this. Nothing else will appear. Creating a homunculus isn't impossible. However, the life expectancy is extremely low. Cynical and critical. But I looked at Gaparam with a slightly different perspective. Homunculus, Gaparam, a special event. It would surface. I finally remembered the name Gaparam. It was from my previous life. A special event that suddenly emerged before the last war. Gaparam had appeared accompanied by a finished homunculus and a chimera corpse. He smashed the dungeon of a duke. The demon's power surpassed unimaginable levels as the last war approached, yet he managed to capture the dungeon of a duke. Gaparam died after being attacked by countless other demons in the faction. However, he just laughed and said, "The research was completed," before he died. At the time, I confirmed the greatness of a homunculus. Due to the quick learning ability of a homunculus, they easily became stronger and faster. So there was no choice but to have a shorter lifespan. Gaparam had somehow managed to surpass those limits. A homunculus that rivaled a high-class 4LV creature. The research was completed. Gaparam's exhibition. I stared at him. I was mindful of the demons around me and kept my reaction cold. This was a product that didn't appear in the original Demon World auction. It seemed to be due to the sharp increase in points. It will succeed. Everything has been set. As long as I can continue my research. He shouted, but the atmosphere was cold. Homunculus, it is the height of inefficiency. I can't throw away 3 million points. There is no one who has that many points. That's right, 3 million points for 1 year of research was unrealistic. That was only required in the early days. As long as I have a proper workshop, 1 million a year will be enough for me. Gaparam was desperate. His voice was trembling. But that was still too much. 1 million points. That was still a distant number. Many demons saved and could barely gather 1 million points in 1 year. As the silent atmosphere continued, I spoke up. Dubalong. Yes, yes? Randolph Nim. What's wrong? So, is it going to start? Ah, it is starting at 0 points. His ability itself is like an ordinary lich, and nothing else is prepared. Damn demons. You don't know how great my research is. It is a crime. Ah, sin. I guess it isn't popular. Dubalong sighed. Then he said, "Shut up, Gaparam. We will leave it up to fate. What they do with you will be purely up to the winning bidder. Damn, Gaparam stamped his foot and cursed bitterly. Anyway, he signed a contract, so there was nothing he could do. He could only hope that he was lucky enough to meet a demon who would allow his research. There was an uproar for a while. I'm sorry. Then let's proceed with the auction. The introduction is already over, and like I said, it is starting at 0 points. No, call out something that suits your taste. It was only a lich. They could buy one for 28,000 points at the store. 1,000. Then I will bid 5,000 points. 50,000. 100,000. There isn't anything special. Anyway, he may cause problems. But the price soared to 100,000. The Demon World auction was an opportunity to get the good items for a cheap price. Anyone could buy one from the store, so this was an expensive price for a lich. It was due to the story of the homunculus. The demons couldn't afford such research, but they could use the lich for other matters. Gaparam's face gradually became more stiff. His body was shaking as he formed fists. He didn't want his research to be treated like this. 100,000 points has come out. Is there any more? Dubalong had no expectations. Gaparam gave one last outburst. My research will be finished. The perfect homunculus will be born. Why don't you do it? He is mad. Dubalong, is it possible to cancel a bid? I'm sorry, but that is impossible. The mockery and contempt. Gaparam's research didn't receive any recognition at all. Dubalong frowned as he attempted to quickly conclude the auction. Then 100,000, 500,000. Randolph Nim. Did I hear wrong? 500,000 points. Dubalong. He blinked, but Dubalong soon regained his stability. From his position, the lich was being sold at an expensive price. Dubalong looked at Gaparam and nodded. He was saying that I had the points to cover the research. Gaparam's expression loosened a little bit. It is clearly a loss. 2 years ago and last year, it is that bastard. Of course, the demons had a totally different reaction. The lich, Gaparam, has been sold for 500,000 points. Randolph Nim, congratulations. Gaparam bowed deeply to me. After raising his head, he looked at the other demons and declared, "You ignorant bastards, you will be sorry. My research will be completed. Then it will be too late for you. Just go." Dubalong growled. Then the dark spirits dragged Gaparam out. Gaparam's expression wasn't bad. A moment of silence. He was a creature who made a large impact. However, it was in a bad way. Hum. Then I will directly introduce the next auction item. Have you heard of the Valley of Souls? There are legends about it. We decided to check it out just once. A soul butterfly was found there. The auction continued. Valley of Souls. It was one of several forbidden places in the demon world. Many spirits didn't come back after entering it. Rather, spirit bodies received larger damage the closer they got to it. A huge sacrifice was made for the successful expedition. A lot of effort had been poured into this auction. Adonis. He is in a hurry. The Dark Spirit King. His mind was clearly in a hurry after the other Spirit Kings sent spies. He wanted to grow as much as possible. The spirit world might seem calm, but he was thinking about how to achieve such things. Soul butterfly. It wasn't a small change. There was a black shape that looked like a butterfly flying. A butterfly that could move around the Valley of Souls without being affected. Do you see it? This beautiful shape. Soul butterfly can detect and defend against external harmful magic power. So it can freely move in the Valley of Souls. Just giving it to someone is enough to change their magic power. If your intelligence is low, then it is essential that you buy this. It could be the difference between receiving uncontrollable damage in an abnormal state or not. It would be worth a lot of points if the defense was perfect. However, I could confirm the effects using mind's eye. Name, Soul Butterfly. Description. A rare butterfly found in the Valley of Souls. Born in the air. An abnormal state will be reduced by 10%. Can be combined with a weapon. The hidden option drew my eyes. It can show an effect when combined with something. It wasn't bad, but it was a little bit shabby when compared to the claims. Dubalong's smile widened. This is not the end. Do you know what was sleeping in the Valley of Souls that we obtained thanks to the butterfly? Surprisingly, a 30-year-old death knight without an owner was discovered in the valley. Advanced 3 LV creature. Just buying it in the store required 150,000 points. The 30-year Death Knight soullessly walked in. Its magic power reached out around it. Due to the nature of the Death Knight, it became stronger as more days passed. The 30-year one was very different. They could expect an immediate rise in power after purchasing it. It is vague. I touched my jaw. The problem was the soul butterfly. The Death Knight had a definite price, but I couldn't measure the soul butterfly. The Death Knight would be worth between 1 to 1.5 million points. However, the price was likely to rise due to the soul butterfly. In other words, it would become more expensive. The auction will start at 500,000 points. Don't worry, the 30-year Death Knight is worth it. Perhaps some of the guests here have experience with Death Knights in the demon world. How reassuring would it be? You will be able to make your enemies afraid. 500,000. A bid from Duke Vasak. 500,000. 700,000. Duke Drekal Nim. 800,000. Oh, Grand Duke Upa Nim has entered the competition. The competition was heating up. A Death Knight was a symbol of resistance among the nobility. It would be foolish to drive such a powerful knight to an enemy demon. There was no way. The destructive power of the Death Knight was sure to appeal to many. I worried about it for a short moment. I want to purchase it for below 1.5 million. I would abandon it if it became more than that. It wasn't worth spending more points on the soul butterfly. I was likely to receive damages if I was too greedy. It was unlikely that things would be turned upside down. Yet there were still many auction items remaining. And I didn't have an infinite number of points. 1 million. Oh my god, Randolph Nim. You are participating 3 times in a row. Dubalong is expecting a lot from you. The atmosphere became chilly once again. First year, second year, now it was the 3rd year. It was basically my solo show. At the same time, they realized that there was something strange about me. Pandemonium and Okulos knew to some extent, but Ariel and Upa's factions had to guess. Is there anyone else? This product is too good to pass up. The time they spent thinking about it increased. They also couldn't run wild. They all saw it. A high-class creature, Mago. The Death Knight was incomparable to Mago. They didn't know when she was coming out, so there needed to be points in reserve. 1.1 million. HYU tilde Grand Duke Okulos Nim. Nice to see you. I hope you become the owner of the mighty Death Knight. Dubalong made somewhat exaggerated gestures as he sighed with relief. I frowned as I heard Okuyo's voice. Doesn't Okulos hate Death Knights? I was sure because I had never seen Okulos use a Death Knight. He was a nature demon, so he tended to avoid Death Knights who carried death around with them. Is he trying to make up for the minions he lost against the cruel commander? I didn't think it was due to the soul butterfly. His skill, pending question, wasn't higher than mine's eye. I was curious. If he was only trying to fill the troops, then he wouldn't bid too much. 1.2 million. Randolph Nim, you aren't finished yet. 1.3 million. Okulos Nim. 1.4 million. It has gone back to Randolph Nim. 1.5 million. The boys and girls on the ceiling aren't laughing. This means that he holds that many points. As expected for a Grand Duke. I turned my gaze towards him. Okulos was staring at me. He wasn't trying to fill up his troops. That look in his eyes, it seemed like he was showing off. Showing off? 1.5 million points already exceeded the average. He seemed to want to show off how many points he had. His attitude seemed to be provoking me. I also felt a funny feeling like something was stabbing my chest. I quickly opened Mind's Eye. I needed to suddenly check. I was going to find out if a change occurred in Okulos. Mind's Eye, XU, has been read by Eyes of the World, Epic. Defended against 20%, intelligence calibration, 93. But the magic power of the opponent is too high. It is inadequate. Defended against 23%. The defense has failed. Be careful. Eyes of the World, Epic, has reflected back, Mind's Eye, XU. Randolph Briggseel's details will be revealed to Okulos. I felt dizzy. Countless numbers were rising in front of my eyes. Several numbers came out of my body. The surrounding demons showed no reaction. The phenomenon seemed to be only visible to me. But that didn't matter right now. I was deeply panicked. Was it revealed? Okulos smiled, revealed his teeth. His expression seemed to say, I know all about it. At the same time, he made a ho sound of admiration. He led me to this. This was the reason for the 1.5 million points. He showed that attitude to me. It was so that I would use mind's eye on him. I never imagined that this would happen. Many things had changed due to my actions, but this was entirely unexpected. My eyes narrowed. Eyes of the world. It is probably an evolution of pending question. But I didn't see that skill in my previous life. How did he manage to evolve it to epic grade in such a short time? I clenched my fists as sweat flowed. My saliva dried up. Originally Okulos didn't have the skill eyes of the world. It was the same in my previous life. This meant the big change was due to me. But it was still unusual. Raising a skill from unique to epic in only a few months? That wasn't possible even for me. My heart started running wild. He could see a lot if he saw my status window. He could also infer a lot more. The Soul Butterfly and Death Knight have been sold to Okulos. Congratulations. You won't regret it. Dubalong's voice was heard. I could only stare at Okulos. It isn't over. Eyes of the world seemed to read and reflect the opponent's skill. But the water had already been spilled. I had to admit it. I couldn't stay quiet. I needed to deal with this. My mind was complicated. The vow of preparation has been won by Grand Duke Okulos. The creature, Golongal, has been won by Grand Duke Okulos. The heart shoes have. The ensuing auction items. Okuyo's dominance started. He won 5 more items and the 6th item he won was the 10th item to be auctioned. A huge 5 million points was spent. I always focused on efficiency and didn't bid for another item after Gaparam. I decided to move only when Mago came out. However, Okulos always bid even before Mago came out. I needed to make a successful bid in order to break the situation. Only Okulos is participating in this auction. It was another unusual point. All the demons in Okuyo's faction didn't bid in the auction. Okulos was the only one who participated. Strange. The points of other demons could be acquired and used. However, Deathbringer's system wasn't that simple. Even the savvy dark spirits took enormous risks when opening a crack. Trading points was only allowed for legitimate transactions. A reasonable value for goods? Yes, it was theoretically possible. A demon could sell everything in their dungeon. But they couldn't do such a thing without unwavering faith. It only required one demon for betrayal. And it was ridiculous for demons in a faction to believe in each other. This was impossible. Okulos. What magic is this? There was a change. I couldn't read those changes. 12 people. If I combined the points of all the demons in Okuyo's faction, it should still be less than mine. However, I would have to take a loss. Now, the 11th auction item has finally emerged. I bet everyone paid attention to her before the auction. From the Celestial Maiden clan, the high-class creature, Mago. A legendary creature that can travel on the wind and is worth millions of gold. I will be introducing her now. The eyes of the demons shone. The item everyone had been waiting for finally appeared. I was also filled with tension. In particular, I wanted to keep Okulos in check before he got bigger. He might have read my status window but he didn't know my total points. Kwang, Kwang. Soon a huge cage was brought in by the dark spirits. Mago was inside it. Mago kept turning her body around and cried out. Dubalong bowed his head gracefully and extended a hand. It will start at 1.3 million points. 5 million. Okulos Nim? That isn't enough? Ah, no. Oh, Kulos Nim has called 5 million points. Dubalong was jolted from his surprise. 5 million points. The boy and girl statues on the ceiling were still not laughing. They moaned as the points were shouted out. In other words, they were thrilled. There were no other demons that could participate. In the case of Grand Duke Upa, his face turned red at the thought of losing Mago. However, no one cared about Upa. Okulos glanced at me with a smile. He was only looking at me. Okulos? He was hostile towards me? He thought he knew my power from checking my status window? Then he picked the wrong opponent. Quadaduke. I gritted my teeth. He could obtain other items, but Mago was mine. The only high-class 2LV creature present. It wasn't likely to come out the next year or the year after. At the very least, it would increase my lead for a year. I needed to obtain her. I had to firmly maintain my position. I didn't know what Okulos planned to do with my information. However, I wasn't going to hide myself away like a good prey. 6 million. Randolph Nim, it can't be. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. This is a really different race. 7 million. Crazy, it is really crazy. Mago's cries are acting like a celestial harmony. Where will this end? Thanks to this, it was announced that Okulos had at least 12 million points. I frowned as I thought about it. I thought I was the only one who had reached over 10 million. 8 million. Ah, it is a truly reasonable price for Mago, but it has been a while since I felt such a thrill. Randolph Nim has called 8 million points. Silence flowed. All the demons were looking between Okulos and their eyes were filled with complex emotions like doubt, jealousy and annoyance. It was inevitable. An average of 1.3 million. I drove up the average from 1 million by 300,000 points. For many individuals in this auction, 1 million was the limit at which they could participate. It was common sense. They had seen the practical parts involved in managing a dungeon in the past 2 years. It was surprisingly difficult to collect points. However, that common sense was completely broken. It was already half smashed. How? The first emotion felt was doubt. But there were no answers. I knew many things that would happen in the future. That's how I was able to act solo for the past 2 years. But, a new leader had showed up. Okulos. Kuahahaha. He laughed out loud, an uncontrollable and wild laugh. It was strange when thinking of Okuyo's personality. He was someone that almost never expressed his feelings. In particular, he acted like a stone in front of other demons. However, there was no doubt. His body shook like he was greatly moved. Indeed, Randolph Brigzeal, you have crossed the line. Your entire power wasn't shown the other day. Kahahahaha. Stop talking nonsense. I didn't know what he was talking about. The line? It was the first time I heard about it. I didn't like the feeling of someone defining and judging me. Especially when that person was a Grand Duke. However, Okulos continued to bark. I will tell this to all of you. This game is not possible. It is ridiculous to think that you guys will ever grow beyond a puppy. It is because you haven't crossed over the line. Okulos, you are interrupting to talk alone to a wall. I can't listen anymore, Dubalong said with a nod. But Okulos showed no interest in Dubalong's words and didn't respond. All the Grand Dukes, Dukes and Demons were concentrated on Okulos. I felt weak the moment I accepted Deathbringer's offer. I thought it was simply a restriction. But no, I realized after gradually regaining my strength and crossing over the line. The weakness is preparation for a jump. I will become stronger and eventually evolve. I will become an existence beyond the devil. A passionate rant. It wasn't limited to me, but a message conveyed to all the demons. That wasn't the end. Aren't you curious? It is possible to be reborn as any existence. Why are you focusing on humans? Destroying the planet Earth is simple, so why can't you figure this out? Okulos, that guy, is he crazy? Ariel, she spoke coldly. Becoming a devil, that was the goal the Grand Dukes were focused on. But it was dismissed as simple. Okuyo's remarks had definitely gone too far. I didn't originally plan to say this. It is never good to give benefits to the other side. But I feel too sad. It is impossible to become a species if I evolve alone. All of us have to transcend in order to become a species. So I will give a chance to you. Randolph Brigzeal has a head start, but you still have the opportunity. You might be weak right now, but become stronger. Strong pride, self-esteem, from my viewpoint, you are still beginners. Too young for such opportunities. If you are too weak, if the root itself is weak, evolution will be impossible even if you become stronger. However, the Grand Dukes that have ruled the demon world for hundreds of years are a different story. Many phrases were conveyed, but the message was simple. Only the Grand Dukes and I weren't lacking. A true declaration of hostility. The frowns naturally increased. I can sense that you've assimilated with the souls of the demons under you. Okulos, have you really gone crazy? Pandemonium ventured out at this moment. He was old and well versed in creatures and spells. He frowned. The flow of your magic power has strangely changed. This isn't natural for demons and you are going down the path of your own destruction. The 12 demons under Okulos. Their souls were assimilated, so he could even use the points of the demons under him. But such actions would eventually bring him to ruin. It was very dangerous to assimilate souls and there had been no successful cases. Such acts were forbidden in the demon world. However, Okulos seemed to have other ideas. No, this is the beginning of my evolution. Everyone can't see it, but I can feel it. The unstable souls are balanced by my naturalization skill. Of course, this method isn't correct. It is just one of several ways to make me more comfortable. In short, I have a way to break common sense. Pandemonium clicked his tongue. He realized that communication wouldn't work. The generosity and kindness of a Grand Duke was limited. The reaction of the other Grand Dukes was the same. Connecting the souls. Assimilation. They knew too well the risks that it would bring. Yet the crazy Okulos was only talking about evolution. It was great that he had a vast amount of points, but that was all. Yes, I hate to admit it. But you will soon know. All those who step over the line will be qualified. Please, realize it before the hunter starts hunting. I will welcome anyone who wants to follow me in the end. The hunter was referring to me. It was obvious that he saw my title. Okulos turned around. The 12 demons under him moved like they were one as they followed him. Keek, Kung. The cold atmosphere disappeared as the door closed. Okulos abstained from buying anything else at the auction. I quietly looked in the direction that he disappeared in. Originally I was going to get rid of Upa first. My plans were constantly changing. Upa was placed as the top priority merely because he was annoying. Once Upa started moving, he would fight dirty. I had aimed to cut off the stem. Someone like that would become more annoying the longer I left him alone. If I knew the situation would turn out like this, then I would have poured in everything when I had the cruel commander. Although I likely wouldn't have been able to stay hidden after that, I would have flown higher. I deeply reflected, how could I have expected that Okulos would swallow up other demons to obtain power? I could deal with Upa because he didn't know me. However, Okulos knew me. I also didn't know the levels he had reached. There was no way he would only make a little bit of progress. So, Okulos, you should have remained in the background. First of all, I had to eliminate him. The auction continued. As a result, Mago ended up in my hands. I had roughly 11 million points remaining. Originally I had intended to buy only one more item, but I changed my mind. It seemed necessary to reinforce my strength. Okulos had assimilated the souls of 12 demons. He seemed to be aiming for my back, so I needed to be able to handle him. Or else I might end up stabbed through the neck. But a little more time was needed. My strength was still lacking against 13 demons, including Okulos. I need to handle this problem. There is also the possibility that he will self-destruct due to the assimilation. Okulos needed to be killed. I was positive that his body was currently burning up and suffering from the process. If I was lucky, then Okulos and the remaining 12 demons would self-destruct. I needed to do some preliminary preparation at this auction. My original plan was to select the appropriate items to build up my power, but Dwarf King, often referred to as the final form of a dwarf. The Dwarf King is born knowing how to handle all metals. It will start at 600,000. 600,000. Marquis Anastasia Nim, 700,000. Grand Duke Upa Nim, 800,000. Once again Randolph Nim. Where is his limit? The atmosphere once again died. It was natural for them to feel weary and resentful. The result was shown from Dubelong's following words. The Dwarf King has been sold for 800,000 points. Congratulations Earl Randolph Nim. The Dwarf King was indispensable when it came to creating things from the Tree of Origin. Stein and the other dwarves only had adequate skills. The Dwarf King was needed for an overall qualitative improvement. The equipment and weapons used by the Dark Elves and creatures would be enhanced. That alone made it worth spending 800,000 points on the Dwarf King. After that, I gave up a few items. I relaxed and played the role of a decoy. My purpose of participating in this auction had changed, but I couldn't neglect my final goal of hampering the demons. Soon the 19th auction item arrived. Now, let me introduce the following auction item. I introduced them in last year's auction, M1 and M2. They were only iron sheets, so some didn't realize their true value. Only the buyer personally experienced the benefits. But this time, it is worthy of praise at first glance. M3. Chiok. Slow footsteps. Soon a knight wearing full-length red body armor and holding a long lance could be seen. Different. There were few similarities to M1 and M2. From the feel of the magic power to the appearance, everything seemed quite different. Plus, M3. I couldn't remember him. There was no reason why I shouldn't be able to remember a golem like this. He gave off a strong presence with just one glance. I opened mind's eye with interest. Name: M3. Stats: Strength 90, Intelligence 0, Agility 90, Stamina 80, Magic Power 80, Potential 340 its. Uniqueness: completed from the beginning. There is no more need for growth and there is no sense of self since its intelligence is 0. But the golem gives its best performance under a powerful master. There are more improvements since M1 and M2. Skill: Gale, XU, Joint Attack, XU. My first thought after checking M3's status window was obedient. He was good in all respects when compared to M1 and M2. In particular, Gale and Joint Attack were perfect skills to use. He was strong enough to engage with high-class creatures. Although he was slightly lacking compared to Mago, the other Grand Dukes were eyeing him. It will start at 600,000. It was the same opening bid as the Dwarf King, but the atmosphere was more heated. It was a law that in order to create something, materials were needed. I had the Tree of Origin to use as materials for the Dwarf King, making me different from the other demons. Materials were more readily available for me. 600,000. Duke Vasak Nim. 700,000. Marquis Ganwiziu Nim. However, it was a different story when it came to pure strength. I had M1 and M2, so my eyes naturally went to M3. 800,000. A hot atmosphere. Awesome. Earl Bahaso's Nim. Mago, who received the hottest attention, was sold to me, so the demons weren't worried about their points anymore. All hesitation about buying things had disappeared. Of course, I was the decoy so I couldn't stay still. For example, Duke Vasak Mentum, who looked interested in the auction, would continue to participate after I bid. Right now, it was fun to watch the bidding. They wouldn't be able to move unless instructed by Grand Duke Upa in advance. He is a demon who covets things. He is planning to gobble up the items in the second half. He has such intent. Due to the nature of the Demon World auction, there might be good items in the beginning and bad items at the end. Sometimes more useful items would often appear in the second half. Perhaps, Upa was truly aiming for the second half. After losing Mago in the beginning, he didn't participate and decided to focus everything on the second half. So he was trying to thin out the competition in advance. My expectations didn't seem wrong when considering how toxic Upa and his faction was. He clearly established a strategy. He must be feeling urgent. In fact, Upa wasn't in a good situation right now. He lost demons, so it was necessary to reinforce his power. He looked impatient after the auction started, but now I knew his actions weren't the truth. A smokescreen. That's right, smokescreen. He aimed to use this to trick the enemies and reverse the situation. Thanks to Okulos, most eyes moved away from Upa. In fact, Grand Duke Upa's faction had won the most goods from the auction so far. I only just realized this. Okulos acted as a decent smokescreen. Talk. I slapped my knee. Okulos left such a strong impression that it eclipsed Upa's faction. This could be a huge chance for Upa. The other Grand Dukes, Ariel and Pandemonium. Did they realize Upa's strategy? 900,000. He is playing. Earl Randolph Nim. 900,000 points have come out. 1 million. Ah, this time it is Grand Duke Upa Nim. Upa was still faking an uncomfortable expression on his face. It was ridiculous. The Grand Duke was still acting as he came forward. Certainly, the situation was rapidly changing. Even now, Upa still looked anxious and irritated. It seemed like he couldn't make the top bid anymore. At the same time, he knew someone else would surely make the top bid. Some demons are looking at the long term. 1 or 2 years would make a significant difference. I had purchased Mago while Okulos became stronger through a taboo method. He had to hurry. In order to eliminate his anxiety, he was obsessed with getting more creatures and good items. 1.1 million. Grand Duke Pandemonium Nim. M3 is a very powerful golem. Pandemonium, who is familiar with magic, has realized the astronomical value of M3. The behavior that Upa showed here was simple. The sound of his fingers tapping wouldn't stop. Grand Duke Upa and his faction showed a great performance. It was silent after Pandemonium's words. It was a sign that it was settled at 1.1 million points. At that moment, Dubalong opened his mouth to make the final declaration. I smiled and opened my mouth. 1.2 million. Earl Randolph Nim has made the top bid once again. I just folded my arms and closed eyes. I was running quickly without worrying about problems. Looking at others would just make my mind more troubled. Is there any more? I will give you 3 seconds. If there aren't any more bidders, then Randolph Nim will win M3. 3, 2, 1. However, Upa didn't make another bid. He appeared satisfied that he had raised the bid by 100,000, then 200,000. Congratulations. M3 now belongs to Randolph Nim. A few other minor items were omitted. Upa's ulterior motive became more obvious. After Okulos came out and talked about crossing the line, the fire when bidding had subsided a little bit. They considered it highly likely that I also broke the taboo. Ariel was still looking down at me with a cold gaze. It seemed she was still furious about having Hyen Moon's necklace stolen away from her. I am going to destroy her anyway. Shall I give you some time to become my opponent? I only paid attention to the items and didn't worry about the greedy competition. I was still worried about Okulos, but I was satisfied with this position. I did Upa a favor and leisurely purchased items. It would be better to benefit as much as possible while he was still under an illusion. Thanks to that, I easily added Millennium Stigma and Lightning Orb to my collection. Both had vague options that I wasn't significantly greedy for, but I needed to maintain my current position in the competition. The next item I am introducing is a little unusual. It is an item that I can't describe. Yes, the unknown box. This is it. The dark spirits brought out a big box. The appearance of the box was extremely ugly. It wasn't a normal item seen in the Demon World auction. While everyone was puzzled, Dubalong let out a sign. Have you heard of someone called the Thief of the Century? He is a legendary figure that existed 500 years ago. 500 years ago. It wasn't that long. Pandemonium was from that era and his face froze after hearing it. It didn't seem like a good expression. He seems to have heard it before. A careful thief, or an adventurer. He was active in the demon world hundreds of years ago. I remembered a story about a thief able to steal techniques. The locations of treasures were obscure places and quite a bit of adventuring was required to obtain them. Places like the Valley of Souls, the underground wilderness, Red Scorpion Mountains, the Lion's Lake, etc. He easily gained many great things from those places. I didn't know if this was true or not, but I was interested in the name. Dubalong then continued, "This is the only treasure remaining." This was a ridiculously difficult item to obtain from the underground wilderness. However, there are fairly strong constraints on it. Once opened, it is non-transferable like a curse. Therefore we couldn't confirm the items in it. It is a troublesome position to be in when trying to sell it. The dark spirits knew a great deal about seals. The same was true for curses. Yet this was a seal that they couldn't solve. It isn't a normal box. The problem was that no one could know what was inside. I calmly used Mind's Eye. I might be able to find a hidden option that the other demons weren't aware of. Name: Unknown Box. Description: a box concealed by a famous thief. It is unknown what the box contains. Asterisk: it is non-transferable once opened. Everything in the box will be forced onto the person who opens it. Asterisk: only one item will emerge and the rest of the items in the box will be destroyed. The higher the person's intelligence, the higher the probability of a good item coming out. It reminded me of the Mimic. It was a box-type creature that hid exclusive items in its body. But only one item would emerge while the rest would be destroyed. Higher intelligence, nobody knew what would emerge. Instead, intelligence was largely involved. Intelligence. I had Chrisley up my sleeve. She was someone who had an overwhelming 105 intelligence, a number that surpassed 100. It was enough to make a gamble. The only remaining thing was the price. It will start from 1 million points. I'm sorry. However, our losses were too big while obtaining it from the underground wilderness. Of course, this box was carefully hidden, so I'm sure the contents aren't ordinary. Isn't there a high probability of it containing a sealed item? Even Dubalong didn't seem certain. Yet he was still trying his best to sell it. It was in order to make up for their losses. It wasn't possible to transfer, so the dark spirits couldn't check it. Even so, the price was too high for a sealed item. The demons couldn't see the hidden options, so not many would think of buying it. The dark spirits wanted only one person. It was the reason why Dubalong looked around with embarrassment. Too many spirits had died while exploring the wilderness. It was a much more dangerous place than the Valley of Souls. Is there really nobody? The last box left behind by a legendary thief. We followed his footsteps, but he didn't leave anything else behind in the world. Only this box remains. Aren't you curious? The only one. I decided to buy it. It was something carefully left behind. I also had Chrisley with her 105 intelligence. That alone made it worth giving it a try. But I didn't act immediately after making the decision. I gave the impression to Dubalong and the other demons that it was a difficult choice. Upa had intruded in vain, giving him a headache. The list of items that he stole is amazing. Just obtaining one of them would make it worth spending 1 million points for the box. No, if you are lucky enough to even obtain the Sign of the Dead Mountains, then it is easily worth more than 10 million points. He cried out loud, but it just echoed through the venue. Dubalong counted for a while before saying, "I will count down from 3. After this time, you will never see the box again." The Dark Spirit King is eyeing it. 3, 2, 1 million. Ah, Earl Randolph Nim, I guarantee that there is only one left of this in the world. I sincerely wish that you obtain a good item. There was no need to wait for any further bids. I instantly became the winner of the unknown box. And Dubalong was looking at me with gratitude in his eyes. He seemed to think I bought it after the mention of the Dark Spirit King. He thought that I didn't want a bad relationship with each other. But I didn't have such intentions. I had completely high expectations for the unknown box. I will allow him to maintain that delusion. There was no need to point it out, so I just shrugged. Chapter 120 to 121. Flesh and Bones. The rest of the auction continued similarly. The result was that Upa monopolized the later items. Pandemonium wasn't greedy and bought minor items, while Ariel had a strategy of only buying skills. And I purchased anything I wanted to buy. Without looking at the long or short term, I showed a buying power that surpassed the first and second years. I focused on things that would benefit me. So once again, I was able to be the winner of this auction. Everybody else was in a similar position, while I had the advantage with Mago. First of all, the list of creatures that I purchased was as followed. Warriors from the Kerr clan, a Naga Queen, 5 Krakens and 100 Infernos. If I added Mago, the Dwarf King and the Lich I already bought, it was expected that my power would rise. I also picked up a number of items. Good. I smiled as I recalled the details of the items I purchased. Name: Dragon Armor, XU. Description: full body armor filled with the energy of a dragon. If someone with the blood of a dragon wears this, then their natural strength will greatly rise. Asterisk strength +3. There will be a fear effect when someone with the blood of a dragon wears it. Asterisk dragon related skills will be enhanced. Name: Firm Conviction, XU. Description: a primitive helmet used by the best female warrior, Aldoran. A warrior who hid her face all her life with this helmet, her strong conviction was enough to set an example for all. Asterisk Stamina +2, Magic Power +2, can only be worn by a woman. Asterisk a strong conviction will be given when worn. Asterisk a binding title, Firm Conviction, R. Stamina +3, is attached. Name: Fairy Knight's Sword, sealed. Description: a sealed weapon. It can only be used by a fairy. Asterisk the effects are unknown until the seal is released. Asterisk when worn, the fairy blessing will become more powerful. Name: Twins Mental Rapport, XU. Description: the diary of one twin. Since they were born, the twins were able to communicate with each other even when separated. They suffered mental problems as they communicated while growing up. They always learnt something twice as fast. Asterisk a skill book that teaches the twins communication. You can indirectly share each other's experiences. Asterisk in an urgent situation, health can be shared. These were assigned to separate owners. But the Millennium Stigma and Lightning Orb were very helpful items for me. Up to here, I used approximately 20 million points. Once I used exactly 2 million points, a message window appeared. Incredible achievement, you are the first to spend more than 20 million points in the Demon World auction. 1,500,000 PT will be paid. 1,000 achievement points will be added. My 2 million reserve instantly increased to 3.5 million. I had been a little bit worried. This was the second half of the auction. Upa's monopoly was continuing. There was no auction item that I immediately needed. But it would be good if I could block Upa's restoration of power. His strength had been cut by 3 demons. The target moved to Okulo's, but Upa was the next opponent. This was a chance to stop his recovery to a certain extent. I continued spending points to hamper Upa. Duke Vasak, who was sitting next to him, had the veins in his neck bulge with anger. Randolph Brigzeal, what type of tricks are you using? Tricks. It wasn't nice to hear that. I lightly clicked my tongue and said, didn't Okulos say it? I have crossed the line. Yes, I crossed the line. Someone who hunted demons and penetrated the ranks of the humans. I was someone who held the title of a hunter. I hated being treated like I was equal to Okulos, but that misconception would be lifted over time. The moment they realized the misunderstanding, it would be too late. I smiled and folded my arms. I wouldn't give them any more answers. None of them were completely satisfied, but the auction couldn't be interrupted again. The auction ended. However, there was still work to be done. I met up with Dubalong in the back of the hall. What brings you here? I wanted to ask about any sightings of the 7 sins. In the past 2 auctions, I had obtained some items from the 7 sins set. I was convinced that Adonis had all of them, but they didn't make an appearance this time. Dubalong nodded lightly. The 7 sins set is something that the Dark Spirit King highly values. He determined that giving you another one would be reckless. I don't think it is because of that. Is he suggesting a contract? The other day when I saw Adonis, he had asked for a contract. I refused, so this was clearly the result. Dubalong's expression changed at my frank words. You are jumping ahead. If you wait a little bit longer, then it would be slowly revealed. I have tasted the great power once, so any patience has disappeared. It is my nature to want the things that belong to me. It can't be helped. Even if it is given in a separate trade, it would cost at least 20 million for only one item. I could see it now. They were trying to tame me. Adonis would slowly give me a mild amount of food in order to turn me into a docile lamb. In the end, I would be bound by the contract. In fact, I felt some anxiety at the 7 sins being held hostage. I had become ecstatic after tasting the strength of the 7 sins. That strength was like a drug and couldn't be easily cut off. 20 million points. It is unfortunate, but I don't have that. Anything less will be difficult. Then what about this? I have something that can raise the limit of the potential. Do you know what that means? But I wasn't without my own weapons. The essence of origin. It was an item that increased the potential threshold by 1. This was a temptation that Adonis wouldn't be able to refuse. Even surpassing the threshold by 1 would allow him to become stronger. The method to do this was through items, a title or a skill. It was why he inevitably needed points. An item that surpassed the limits by 1 couldn't be ignored. Breaking the limits was very important to Adonis. Therefore, he had no choice but to try and increase the limit by at least 1. As expected, Dubalong's expression changed. He bowed his head like he was thinking about it. In reality, he bowed because it felt like he had been punched in the abdomen. Are you making fun of me? Using the points or the essence can raise the potential threshold by 1. Maybe Adonis will know the name. The essence of origin. His eyes flashed. The clown makeup turned colorless. I leisurely smirked and said, based on those signs, you have heard of it. Isn't that an essence of the gods that isn't easily found? No, I know of only one tree of origin, and that exists in heaven. As you know, the angels attacked us. I accidentally obtained one at that time. I couldn't tell him that I had a tree of origin in my dungeon. I had to hide my secrets as much as possible. Dubalong tried to suppress his excitement as he spoke. What do you want? As a reminder, we don't have all of the 7 sins set. In addition, we can't hand over all of it for just 1 essence. They couldn't hand over the whole set? I was a little bit disappointed. I wanted the complete set of items. However, I wasn't in a significant rush. I had managed to replace one of the 7 sins set with the infinity armor. I think in exchange for the essence of origin. The moment that I was trying to speak. Master, there is big trouble. Sik has sent Yihi an urgent request for help. Creatures are attacking. It is hard to block them. What are you thinking? Dubalong couldn't endure it and asked. I frowned and shook my head. We will have to delay this. Have any demons left the Demon World auction yet? Grand Duke Okulos and his faction are the only ones who have left. What is the problem? The demons stopped all activities on the day of the Demon World auction. Of course, their creatures couldn't move without their orders. They could give commands ahead of time, but it was unlikely they would entrust attacking a dungeon to someone else. Especially if the number of creatures moving was hard to stop. China's dungeon had grown greatly, but the basic structure was still the same. In other words, someone was attempting a full-scale invasion. Okulos? It could only be Okulos. He used the gap when I was still participating in the Demon World auction. I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been able to communicate with Yihi. I also tried to solve this problem in my previous life and had installed a magic dimensional notification. The tacit non-aggression pact on the day of the Demon World auction wouldn't always last. But this was only the third year, so I hadn't installed it. In this case, did he prepare in advance to hit me? Odudik. I gritted my teeth. Somehow, his honest speech seemed to be sniping at me. He acknowledged my presence. It was a type of declaration of war. As expected, it was really Okulos. I couldn't understand that fellow. I will be going first. Then should I contact you separately? Yes, that would be appreciated. I turned and quickly moved. The crack was opened. Once I returned, Yihi greeted me with wide eyes. There is big trouble. Big trouble. 6-6 dungeon is in danger of being torn down. Don't panic. Rather, what is the situation? There are over 2,000 intermediate creatures and 50 advanced creatures. Yihi has been doing the calculations. 6-6 alone won't be able to stop them. I almost prayed for her. It wasn't all his strength. Still, it was clearly a significant amount. Everything would be in vain if my dungeon core broke. I had to stop it before that happened. Chrisley? I called her earlier. Now she will arrive. Does she know the story? To a certain extent, Yihi told her the main parts. Well done, Yiha. This isn't the time to be laughing. Yihi tried to control her mouth as her eyes moved towards me. Chrisley arrived with Krasla and several creatures. She understood the situation beforehand and came with the creatures with good mobility. It would take time for the items purchased at the Demon World auction to arrive. First I needed to stop the creatures with what I had now. Krasla, Gigantes, White, Black and the Saber Tigers. The Lich and Advanced Golems were also included. It is great to see Dungeon Master. They kneeled in unison. However, there wasn't a lot of time. Rise. We will move immediately. Yihi, open the space. Please wait a moment. Yihi closed her eyes. The dungeon core started to resonate. Wing. The dungeon core began to shake. An intense resonance was produced. But I didn't order them to move immediately. Chrisley, lead the group of Saber Tigers separately. Do you know the location of the dungeon in China? I know it. Block the rear. Don't let even one of them escape. Our goal is to annihilate all those bastards. I will follow your command, my dungeon master. I finished sorting the creatures and turned my head. The rest will come with me. From the moment we move there, soak your bodies in the blood of the enemies. Follow me. I formed a fist. Okulos. The enemy forced this confrontation. However, I had no intention to obediently give in. If he wanted to end it now, then good. I wouldn't avoid it. If he wanted to take my flesh, then I would give him my bones.